Chapter 400. In a few minutes, they arrived at a massive circular structure that was over 1,500 feet in height. It looked similar to the design of a stadium, but it was at least 2 times larger. It had diamond-shaped outer coverings, and a massive black orb was floating in the middle, covering the top area of the arena and causing the middle of the grounds to covered by its immense shadow. This was Battle Arena number 7, and cadets could be seen streaming into the place one after the other. Everyone was interested in seeing how today was gonna unfold for several reasons. Mostly they were interested in seeing the capabilities of the special class cadets because they didn't partake in any of the test phases, except Gustav, of course. There was no doubt that it'd be an interesting day. The spectators' seats surrounded the main grounds in the middle. It was capable of containing more than 10 times the amount of cadets currently present. Ring-like stages could be seen placed on the ground in front. These ring-like stages covered a radius of 3,000 feet each, leaving enough space for opponents that were going to battle within it. These stages were about 5 in number. At the time Gustav and the rest arrived there, almost all the cadets from first years had gathered. Senior cadets that were currently around also showed up, as well as cadets who were being trained in other aspects like the scientific and technology field. There was a part of the spectators' corner on the northwest side of the battle arena that was barricaded. It looked more luxurious and well-designed compared to other areas. There were about 10 seats away from there, 5 on the first row and the other 5 on the second row. 7 officers could already be seen seated in that area, and one could tell that they would be in charge of today's events. The instant it clocked 10 a.m., an officer stood up from that area and walked towards a part of the grounds. He had a dark bare face with blue scales on his left cheek and a massive human-shaped body that was at least 8 feet tall. The cadets recognized him to be Officer Cole, their instructor who trained them on maximizing the damage of bloodline attacks. Everyone should know why we're here, so we'll just go straight to the point, he voiced out bluntly. Surprisingly, without using any electronic voice output, his voice was loud enough to travel to every corner of the vicinity. True in. The massive black orb floating hundreds of feet above the stage area suddenly lit up. The special class cadets have each accepted 3 challengers, Officer Cole voiced out next while gesturing for the cadets to fix their eyes on the massive orb. The orbs displayed the images and names of 57 special class cadets, one after the other, as well as the 3 challengers that they would each be battling. Yes, Falco chose to face me. I will become a special class cadet today. Who the hell is Calber Manoa and these other 2? Why did Sanders not choose to face me instead? Oh look, it's that Tsubomi guy said to be the best in defense. Looks like Chad agreed to his challenge. Out of all the special class cadets to challenge, he decided to go against one of the top 3. As the images changed to different cadets after a few seconds of display with their opponents, the spectators voiced their opinions. As it got to Gustav's part, a particular green-haired kid seated on the opposite side of Gustav's position smirked. That Dietrich. I remember that he's very strong. He even outlasted a lot of special class cadets during this morning exercise. Yeah, but I don't think he can defeat Gustav even though he's strong. He's among the rich kids that can afford practically any type of tech available in the weapons vault. Gustav might fall here today. This girl, Angie, they say she's the softest. I bet she'll be defeated today. The cadets were still voicing out different and similar opinions. In a few more seconds, the orb finished displaying every single one of the special cadets, but Elevera's case was different from the others. She was challenged by only a single person. Her fight was the only one the cadets weren't looking forward to because they could already tell how it would end. The system will generate the turns randomly. Only 5 battle rings are available, so 10 images will be generated first. The instant your image appears among the 10, move over to the battle ring in 10 seconds, or you automatically forfeit your match, Officer Cole stated. Fight to your heart's content. We have a healing team on standby. However, once your opponent is knocked out or voices out their wish to forfeit the match, you are to stop attacking instantly. Attacking an opponent after they have surrendered will attract penalties, he explained with a strict look before walking away from the stage area. In the next instant, the giant orb above suddenly started displaying pictures very quickly. Zim. It changed pictures repeatedly in a very quick manner, and in a few seconds, it stopped. 10 pictures were displayed. Mitsurui versus Gabon, Vulcan versus Tiana, Rena versus Falco. Falco happened to be among the first special class cadets picked by the system for battle. From their sitting position, E smiled as he turned to face Falco. "Go get him." He slapped Falco at the back of his head lightly with an encouraging look. Eldris also smiled and tapped his shoulders as Falco stood to his feet and started walking forward. As he climbed down the elevated spectators area, he turned around for a brief moment. Gustav's thumb was raised slightly and pointing at him. He smiled and nodded as he looked forward and kept walking. The other cadets who saw their images displayed on the screens also began to move towards the platforms in front. Each battle ring was thousands of feet away from the next, and they all entered different ones. As Falco picked the third one on the left, which was the closest to his position to the spectators area, a 5.5 feet tall busty girl with glasses walked into the battle ring. She had her yellow hair tied up in a bun. She was holding onto a cylindrical-shaped gadget. In the battle rings within the vicinity, the other cadets had also moved in and stood in front of their opponents, ready to throw down. All the special class cadets had not a single shred of nervousness displayed on their faces. Their opponents, on the other hand, became wary from the moment they stood in front of them except for Falco's opponent. In this situation, Falco was the one who was actually looking a bit nervous. "Go easy on her, okay?" Falco muttered. "You don't have to go easy on me because I'm a girl. You'll be losing your title as a special class today, Falco," she said while tightening her hand around the cylindrical-shaped gadget. Tian. The gadget opened up and started expanding, merging with her skin. In a few seconds, half of her body was covered in purplish-looking armor. "I wasn't saying that because you're a girl. I was saying that because of Hai." Before Falco could explain himself completely, "Begin." Officer Cole voiced out from the spectators area. "True iron." Bang. Boom. The instant the go-ahead was given, the cadets started attacking instantly. The normal cadets didn't wait for a second more. They had already sent out one of their mightiest attacks because they understood that holding back might cost them since they were going against a special class cadet today. Bye-yi. Bye-yi. The girl in front of Falco had already dashed forward as her elbows transformed into rocket ignition, pushing her arms forward with intensity. Her palms carried a whirling mass of red energy as it traveled towards Falco's chest and face with speed. "Don't har. Shut up, dweeb. I'm taking over." Before Falco could speak, his body started turning dark as tattoos appeared on visible parts of his skin. Half of his face instantly turned dark, along with his eyeballs. Suihai. Falco's alter ego moved to the left in the blink of an eye, causing the first strike to miss him, and he grabbed onto the girl's left arm before pulling her forward. "Fuck off, bitch." His knee slammed into her stomach, causing the cracks to appear in that spot as she got sent flying several feet backwards. Swoosh! He dashed forward with speed and threw his left palm forward. Before the girl could realize what was happening, her entire sight got covered by Falco's left palm as he grabbed onto her head and slammed her forcefully into the ground. Bang! KRHHYKKK. Cracks spread across a radius of 500 feet as dust and debris got sent flying into every direction. Dash, did he just end the fight in less than 10 seconds? Chapter 401. Dash, did he just end the fight in less than 10 seconds? The crowd of cadets spectating was shocked as they noticed the fight end so soon in Ring 3. Even the invisible dome covering the edges of the ring to prevent the attacks from affecting the audience rippled when Falco slammed his opponent's face to the ground. The equipment covering her body had merged itself back from the crack Falco's alter ego caused. However, the girl had been knocked out cold. Blood trickled from her forehead as Falco straightened himself and turned around to leave the ring. The cracks that extended all across the ground also began to mend. Dash, was Falco always this strong? The cadets were still quite surprised because they had never really seen Falco getting taken over by his alter ego. They noticed the dark tattoos all over the exposed parts of his skin begin to retract as he moved towards his sitting position. The gigantic black orb floating above displayed Falco as the winner of the match as the medical team moved towards the platform to pick the girl up. "I told you to be less brutal," Falco mumbled underneath his breath as he climbed up. On the other rings, battles were still going on. However, from the looks of things, no normal cadet had leverage over the special ones. One of the battle rings was covered in sticky diamond-looking goo, as massive pillars shot out from one part of the ground. The normal cadet battling this special class cadet was formerly gliding through the air using a flying board when he was encircled by these pillars. He was able to dodge a few, but in the next second, he was encompassed by two massive ones that slammed into him from behind and in front. Bang! A massive shield suddenly appeared around him, protecting him from the attack. However, the special class cadet didn't relent and kept on attacking. The normal cadet only managed to pull off, manifesting a few attacks, but he was still being pushed back. On the other rings, the normal cadets were also being pushed back by the special class cadets regardless of their gadgets. In a few more minutes, all the special class cadets defeated their opponents and were headed to their seats. The spectating cadets were wowed by the performances they had just witnessed, especially that of Falco's. Falco was only ranked around the top 50 strongest, so a lot of them targeted him based on his rank among the special class being low. They had no idea that the ranking boards only updated their information based on what the hidden cams within the camp had recorded. So only based on the performance of the cadets were the rankings updated. This was Falco's first time battling any other cadet or showing just how powerful he could be. The cadets realized that battling the special classes would not be so simple even though they had also improved during this 1 month. The gigantic orb above displayed that the first turns had been completed and proceeded to start shuffling the images of the cadets once again. In the next few seconds, it displayed the turns of the next 10. The cadets that were next moved towards the platform. 50 minutes went by in a flash, and within this time frame, about 4 turns had been completed, and so far, not a single normal cadet had been able to defeat a special class. Only one normal cadet came close to winning. This battle was quite intense, but they had both practically ran out of energy after using very powerful attacks repeatedly, causing a lot of destruction to the battle ring. However, due to endurance, the normal cadet became unconscious after receiving a very little hit with barely any damage power. At the moment, E had his first battle, and it was with a particularly rich kid who was buffed up with so many gadgets and super defense. He was currently finding it difficult to inflict any damage on the cadet due to the fact that after he broke through a particular layer of defense, another one would come up. I'm gonna keep tiring you out till you run out of bloodline energy. Once you do, your loss is certain, the kid voiced out from the other side. His entire frame was hidden within a massive 12 feet mechanical frame powered by a little bloodline energy. An energy shield surrounded his figure, and this prevented ES vortexes from phasing through. He shook his head with a look of pity. You're only gonna make me end up putting in more effort than I'm not supposed to, he responded with a smile before stretching out his right hand. Arcana Accelerator Membrane, E said internally with a calm look as a violet circle of light surrounded his right arm. Shishun. A massive vortex suddenly opened up behind the cadet with a huge suction force coming from it which immensely affected the surroundings. The cadet's eyes widened slightly as he felt the pull of the vortex from within the energy barricade surrounding him. It was pulling the mechanical suit he was hiding in specifically while the energy barricade surrounding him was unaffected. EE's eyes suddenly glowed a dark violet color as he snapped his fingers. Pa. The instant that happened, the suction force from the ring increased exponentially. Kayaha! The cadet screamed out as his entire frame with the 12 feet tall mechanical suit got lifted into the air and pulled backwards. Bang! He slammed into the energy shield, which gave way due to him being the one that put it up. In the next instant, his frame was pulled into the vortex. Truinin, Truion, Truinin, Truinin. About 7 more vortexes appeared in midair, scattered across the place. Zwii, Zwii, Zwei, Zwii. The cadet appeared from one with his entire frame moving very quickly and entering into another vortex. He appeared from another one and got flung into another. He kept flying all across the place, getting pulled into one vortex and appeared from another one and getting pulled into another again. Chapter 402. His vision turned distorted due to the speed at which his body was being thrown across the place. He was already feeling like he was going to empty out the contents of his stomach anytime soon. Yi had already moved to the corner of the battle ring so as not to interrupt this process. This continued for about 30 seconds more till he opened a vortex a few feet in front of himself. Sui-hai-ai. The cadet appeared from it, moving in his direction without control. Yi had already arched his arm back at this point. GGHHRRHH. His palm covered in a small vortex swung forward with speed. Bang! It slammed into the mechanical frame as it arrived in front of him, causing ripples to travel across it as the vortex in his palm went through and consumed the body of the cadet within. The mechanical frame flew backwards and slammed into the ground, unable to move again. Truian. Meanwhile, the cadet within appeared on the ground before E, kneeling. I surrender, he mumbled with a drowsy look before falling face flat and losing consciousness. E smiled with a jovial look as he turned around and started heading towards his seat. Looks like I was able to pull it off with ease this time, he said internally with a joyful expression. After EE's fight, that particular turn ended. Everyone wasn't surprised he took that long to defeat the cadet, because they had witnessed just how stacked the cadet was with defenses. They were more astonished to see the variety of things EE could do with his vortexes. Hey man, he gave Gustav a fist bump as he arrived back at their sitting position. Good match? Gustav smiled as he pulled his fist back after the bump. Nah, yours will be better. Why do I have a feeling that you'll be next? E said after sitting as he stared at the massive orb floating above. On the orb, the images of the cadets were currently being shuffled through. It was about to pick the next matchup at random again. I guess we shall see, Gustav said while also staring up. In a few more seconds, the 10 images of cadets that were battling next were displayed. A smile appeared on Gustav's face as he stood to his feet. Looks like you were right, he turned to EE as he voiced out. Haha, my intuition is top-notch. Go get him, EE responded. Gustav stared at the display up again as he turned to start moving forward. This won't take long. I'll be back soon, his declaration was with a low tone, but due to the confidence imbued within it traveled across the ears of a lot of cadets in the vicinity. Ugh, he's so cocky. Well, he might not be wrong. He is top 5 after all. But Billy has a crazy rich background and a lot of gadgets in his arsenal, I'm sure, they voiced out from the background. The whole place turned quite noisy as the cadets spotted Gustav moving down after seeing his picture on the orb. He was the first top 5 battling with a normal cadet today, so everyone was interested in seeing how it would go. Gustav's opponent Billy was quite popular among the normal cadets due to his background as the descendant of one of the wealthiest tycoons in the world. Gustav happened to pick him because of this. He picked 1 rich kid to battle and 2 that were after Matilda's hand. He could more or less predict how his first turn was going to play out since it was going to be with Billy. He arrived within the battle ring, and a 6.5-foot tall slim youngster with black braided hair entered into the same battle ring. Smirk. You made a wrong decision by choosing to accept my challenge. I will prove to everyone that I'm better than a top 5 and take your position, he voiced out while bringing out a black disc structured item that was the size of a thumbnail. He brought out 3 more and placed 1 on his left chest area, 1 on his right chest area, the back of his left palm and his right palm. That's an amplifier. I don't need any more fancy tools to defeat you, he said while adopting a battle pose. GRHH. His muscles started bulging crazily, turning him extremely bulky and monstrous-looking mixed blood with visible veins line. Begin. Bang. Billy dashed out the instant he heard that. The instant he moved a step forward, his foot had already created a small dent on the ground due to the strength his stomp generated. The crowd was shocked and wondered just how much strength he had at the moment. All this time, Gustav had been staring at him with an unbothered look and didn't say a word throughout. However, the instant that the go-ahead was given, he also dashed out with speed. Zweish. A visible line was cut across the air as Gustav arrived almost instantly in front of Billy, who had just moved forward by only a single step. Sui-hai-ai. Gustav's palm traveled in a straight line towards Billy's chest. Billy's eyes widened as he witnessed the crazy speed of Gustav that wasn't present in the past. Truian. A barrier suddenly appeared in front of Billy's chest. Bang. Gustav's palm slammed into the barrier and got prevented from going further. Billy used that instant to quickly throw out a fist towards Gustav. Swerve, despite the speed of the fist, it still missed Gustav as he moved slightly to the side. He wasn't surprised at this defense in the slightest, as he had been expecting it, even though Billy said he wasn't going to use any other means to battle with him. Gustav grabbed hold of the arm and turned around with speed before flinging Billy. Bang! Billy's large body slammed into the hard ground, parting it open. Your gadget protects you from attacks from me, but it definitely won't protect you from slamming into the ground, Gustav said while still holding onto Billy's arm. He could already tell that whatever protective gadget Billy was making use of only reacted to attacks like that, but it definitely wouldn't react when Billy's body was heading for the ground. Gustav pulled Billy upwards with speed and flung him towards the side again. Bang! His entire body slammed forcefully into the ground again. Chapter 403. Gustav pulled Billy upwards with speed and flung him towards the side again. Bang! His entire body slammed forcefully into the ground again. Billy's face squeezed up with a look of humiliation as his body met the ground again. Just as Gustav lifted him again to fling him across the place, a spherical object suddenly spread across his back and ignited, causing fiery blue energy to shoot out of it. Flyaway! The immense powered, filled ignition shot Billy's body forward, freeing him from Gustav's grasp. Swihai! His body spun several times in the air before he landed several hundred feet away. His facial expression was one of anguish as he brought out two more of those circular disc-shaped objects and quickly glued them to his thigh area. His thighs and calves instantly expanded, giving him a more monstrous look. "You're finished," he voiced out as he dashed forward with twice his initial speed. He arrived in front of Gustav and threw out his left fist towards Gustav's face. Dash has been activated. Gustav finally activated Dash, which added 20 points to his current speed level. Swervy! He moved to the side, dodging the fist that tore through the air with a whooshing sound. Swing! 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 Billy threw out his fists repeatedly in a very fast motion towards Gustav's face and body, which he dodged with ease, swerving all across the place. At this point, the cadets spectating were very surprised to see the speed at which Billy was moving, and was even more surprised to see Gustav dodging them without breaking a sweat. Swoon! Gustav leaped backwards by around 100 feet, dodging another attack. But Billy didn't waste a single second before also leaping forward, while arching his left arm back to the limit. Hiya! He shouted out as he threw his mighty fist downward towards Gustav while descending. Swoosh! Gustav moved backwards by a few feet, dodging Billy's huge fist, which ended up slamming into the ground in front of him. Bang! Dust and debris were sent flying into the air as his fist punched a hole through the ground of the battle ring. The wind from the collision spread across the place, causing Gustav's uniform to bloat as he stared at the cracks that were currently spreading around a radius of over 500 feet. "That packs quite the power," Gustav said internally. The cadets spectating were once again astonished by the strength each blow carried. Gustav dashed towards Billy's side and swung out his left foot towards his rib cage area. Room! The same rocket-like ignition as before appeared in the middle of Billy's chest area, again shooting him backwards with speed before Gustav's foot could make contact. Gustav retracted his leg after missing and was about to dash forward when a loud explosion occurred at his position. Bam! Gustav was taken by surprise and blasted backwards by the force of the explosion. His body did a flip in the air as he landed on his feet a few hundred feet back. Dust still covered the entire vicinity in front of him. However, the instant he landed on his feet, a hole-like path was cleared in front of the dust as Billy's huge body came flying through it with speed. He arrived in front of Gustav in almost an instant with his fist aiming for Gustav's head. It practically took everyone by surprise as they stared at the battle ring with widened mouths as they saw Billy's fist appear in front of Gustav's face. Everyone was expecting to hear a loud sound of collision next. However, Sprint has been activated. Billy's fist slowed down by a little in Gustav's line of sight as he activated Sprint. He raised his left palm with speed and put it in front of his face. Pa! A loud sound of collision rang out after Gustav blocked the heavy punch. Krryychh. The ground blasted open underneath his feet due to the immense force behind it. The smile on Billy's face froze as he saw his punch get stopped. Impossible. I used every speed-related item in my arsenal. You shouldn't have been able to stop that, he said warily with a look of disbelief as he tried pulling his fist away from Gustav's grasp. All right, it's time to end this. I've messed around for too long, Gustav muttered underneath his breath as he increased the force of his grip on Billy's fist. Billy groaned in pain as he heard his bones making squeaking sounds. Gustav pulled Billy forward and grabbed onto his wrist area with his right arm before swinging him over himself and slamming him to the ground again. Bang! The already cracked ground of the battle ring cracked even more after the collision. Gustav lifted Billy into the air again and was about to smash him to the ground once more when he activated the rocket ignition gadget. Phew! He had expected himself to be freed from Gustav's grasp once again, but this time, Gustav's grip was so powerful that his body only flayed in the air repeatedly while his arm that was being held kept him in place. Not this time, Gustav said with a calm look before pulling Billy down with force again and smashing him into the ground. Bang! 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 Gustav kept lifting and slamming him into the ground without stopping. The spectators had lost count of the number of times Gustav had slammed Billy onto the ground due to the speed at which he was lifting and throwing his massive body all across the place. Pieces of teeth flew out along with blood as Billy's jaw was smashed along with his forehead that was currently bleeding. Bang! 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 Regardless of that, Gustav didn't mind and continued on with the smashing. Billy was in tremendous pain as he felt his bones breaking. Your opponent has lost consciousness. You can stop now, Officer Cole, who was supervising the battles from the far end of the platform, voiced out. Chapter 404. Gustav smashed Billy's body to the ground one more time and let go of his arm. Oh, my bad, I thought you were stronger than that, Gustav muttered as he noticed that Billy had truly lost consciousness. His right arm had popped out of its socket and was currently twisted at a very crazy angle. His mouth was wide open, displaying his incomplete set of teeth, and his face was smeared in blood along with the hole he was currently lying in. Dash, he's so ruthless. Dash, I'm happy he didn't accept my challenge. Look at that ridiculous strength. Dash, just my type of man. He's so dreamy. The cadets that had spectated the battle had different opinions as they discussed amongst one another. Gustav dusted his palms in a cool way and walked out of the battle ring. Their battle had lasted around 5 minutes. It was longer than expected, but he already had a grasp of his current strength without making use of transformation and other bloodlines. Such massive improvement from accumulating Sarajevo, Gustav said internally with a look of satisfaction. Other cadets were also performing better than before in their battles today due to the same reason. However, their improvement was incomparable to those who lasted longer in accumulating Sarajevo. Gustav wondered just how much Alevra had improved since she lasted as long as he did. He arrived back in his seat and sat down with an undisturbed look like he didn't just flatten an entire battle ring using someone's body. The other battles and other rings were slowly coming to an end, but none of them caused as much destruction as Gustav and Billy's clash. In a few more minutes, the 6th turn ended, and still, not a single person had been able to defeat a special class cadet. In the next 1 hour, another 6 turns were over, and all the special class cadets had battled at least one of their opponents besides Alevra. Eldris' battle with a normal cadet ended in about 30 seconds due to the immense gap in strength. It would have been shorter, but Eldris decided to give the opponent the chance to show what he could do. Glade's fight also didn't take very long since when she used her ultimate move to conjure red energy like a massive structure and crashed it onto the battle ring. Half of the battle ring was blasted apart due to this, along with her opponent. Glade was among the top 30 strongest. After all, Matilda took quite some time to deal with her opponent due to their ability to increase the temperature of the surroundings. Her bloodline, which gave her the ability to conjure silver armor and weapons, almost failed her because the silver armor covering her body was melting due to the immense increase in temperature of the surroundings. She eventually won the battle before her defenses burned up completely. Angie's battle was also quite intense, and Gustav made sure to pay attention to gauge her improvement. To his surprise, She had truly improved way better than he expected. Although he could still see slight hesitation when attacking, she won by knocking the opponent out of the battle ring, which resulted in immediate disqualifications. Some other special class cadets had won their battles quite easily. Now everyone realized that the special class cadets were not just given their special privileges for nothing. They were truly the best. Currently, it was Falco's turn to have his second battle. However, he had been waiting in the battle ring for a while now. The countdown will begin for Galusek to come forth. 9, 8, 7, 6. The voice of an AI reverberated across the place as it counted down. On the other battle rings, the cadets had started battling with their opponents. A few more seconds later, the countdown ended, and Falco's second opponent failed to show up, resulting in his disqualification. This was the first time someone was throwing in the towel by not arriving in the ring to fight. Falco shrugged and turned around to leave after he was announced as the winner of the battle. A lot of cadets were not surprised about this development after remembering how his first battle went. The girl who was knocked out cold had a look of humiliation written all over her face as she stared in Falco's direction. The battle with the others continued, and Gustav with the others awaited their turns again. Several minutes more passed, and it was time for the next turn. The massive black orb floating above the place picked the next turn. This time Gustav noticed a familiar face among the 10. He had acucolored shoulder-length hair and 2 red lines extending from his forehead to his left eyebrow. This was Timmy, and it would seem he also challenged a special class cadet who happened to be ranked among the top 50. Timmy approached the platform beneath along with others who noticed that it was their turn. His short frame was oozing with so much confidence as the red lines extending from his forehead to his left eyebrow glowed up. "Isn't that one of the dudes from Matilda's party?" E mentioned after noticing him. That's Timmy." Falco, who wasn't present at the party, was a bit confused by EE's statement, but he recognized Timmy since he was also among the circle of the rich. "This might get pretty interesting," Gustav muttered underneath his breath as his eyes glowed green and scarlet. "He seems to have really improved in strength," Gustav said internally while zooming his sight on Timmy. He had activated God Eyes, so he could see that Timmy was now way stronger than he used to be. He arrived within the battle ring where the special class cadet was awaiting him. His palms glowed crimson as he adopted a battle stance. The special class cadet could sense that this was no ordinary, normal cadet, so he also adopted a battle stance with a cautious expression while waiting for Officer Cole to give the go-ahead. "Begin." The instant those words were voiced out, both of them darted towards each other. Chapter 405. The instant those words were voiced out, both of them darted towards each other. The special class cadet crossed his arms and separated them, forcefully swinging them sideways. 2 crossed blades with bluish energy sliced forward diagonally towards Timmy. Timmy jumped in the air and spun, dodging both blades. Swirhii. Screeve. 30 feet long gashes appeared on the ground behind Timmy as the blades sliced through it with ease. The instant he landed on his feet, the special class cadet arrived in front of him and swung out his fist towards him. Timmy bent backwards to dodge the swing, but suddenly a bluish 3 feet long blade appeared within his swung-out hand. Timmy was in shock as he noticed the blade slicing towards his head. A red beam of light suddenly covered his left arm as he raised it up quickly. Screv. The blade sliced through the red beam of light and cut 3 inches deep into his arm, but the instant that happened, Timmy also punched out towards the cadet. Bang! His fist landed on the cadet's chest, sending him sliding backwards by a few feet. The bluish energy blade lodged into his hand, turned into light fragments, and disappeared as blood oozed down his arm. He gritted his teeth in pain as he tightened his left fist. The special class cadet stared at his chest area and noticed the dent in the special vest he was putting on. Both of them stared at each other warily for a few moments before dashing forward again. The special class cadet swerved left and right, dodging the attacks while also sending out his. Timmy was almost evenly matched with him, dodging most of the attacks. His palms were still glowing crimson, and at every chance he got, he'd try to make contact. The special class cadet jumped backwards and shot out a dozen bluish blade-like energy from his body towards Timmy below. Bang! 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 Timmy moved quickly from side to side, dodging one blade after the other. Each of them was so powerful that the ground of the battle ring was now filled with cuts, cracks, and lines that extended over hundreds of meters. As Timmy dodged, two more blades headed for his blind spots. He quickly turned around and slapped one of them towards the side. Karawaichh. That particular one dimmed as he slapped it away, while he grabbed the second one with his other hand. It cut into his hand a little due to its sharpness, but the longer he held onto it, the more it dimmed. As the special class cadet landed on the ground hundreds of feet behind, his eyes squinted as he noticed that Truinin, bluish energy started shooting out of his body, simultaneously turning solid. 6 more bluish arms grew out of his sides, 3 on the left and 3 on the right, as well as 4 long insect-like arms grew from his torso area. Next, they made contact with the ground and lifted him into the air. He was no longer using his normal legs at this point, and his frame had gone up to 10 feet. Thry. The legs catapulted him forward with speed as they ran across the ground. His speed was now 2 times as fast. He arrived before Timmy and controlled the arms to swing towards him. Swoosh. Timmy jumped from place to place as the arms slammed into the ground, causing it to split open after missing him. 2 more arms were coming from above, but Timmy jumped up and flipped in midair while spinning his body to dodge the attacks. The instant he landed back, an immensely bright red-like aura suddenly surrounded his entire being as he dashed across the place with speed. Swihai, pa. His hand made contact with 3 legs in a matter of seconds, making them dim. The legs started crumbling in a few seconds, causing the special class cadet to lose balance. Before he could fall, he conjured another bluish leg to support himself while using some hands to touch down also. Timmy suddenly leaped up again and thrust his palm forward. Before his palm could make contact with the special class cadet, a raised arm swung down from above. Bam! The massive bluish energy-like arm and Timmy's palm collided, sending both of them flying backwards. The cadets spectating the battle at this point were surprised because the instant Timmy body was covered by the reddish-like aura. It was as if he received a boost. The other cadets were also having their battle in other rings at this point, but no normal cadet had been able to clash with a special class cadet on equal terms. Gustav stared at their ring in particular and muttered, "Looks like we'll be having a new special class today, huh?" EE and Falco exclaimed with a slightly confused look. "Are you saying he might win?" Falco asked with an intrigued expression. "I'm not saying he might win. I'm saying he will win," Gustav said with a look of certainty. "H&M something does seem special about him," Eldris muttered as well. He couldn't really tell what was up, but his intuition was telling him that Timmy still had more than he had displayed. He's barely depleting any energy even after what he has done so far. Because he decomposes the attacks he makes contact with and turns it into a form of energy for himself, Gustav noticed as he stared at Timmy using God eyes. Gustav had seen Timmy battle, so he knew there were still other things underneath his sleeves that he hadn't revealed yet. The battle continued with them both managing to land hits sometimes and missing. However, the special class cadet was unable to bring Timmy down even after so long. He suddenly activated a power skill where a bluish triangular-shaped structure phased out of his body and expanded immensely. He raised it high as it increased to a size of close to 500 feet. Chapter 406. The cadets were shocked as the massive size cast a shadow over the place, covering Timmy's figure. "Hiya!" he screamed out as he flung the massive structure down with force. "Fwihai!" Even before it landed, Timmy could feel the massive pressure radiating from it as the ground below vibrated, and the wind blew his hair backwards. Thry. The reddish aura surrounding his being suddenly increased in brightness as he raised both arms up with speed. Banging. The loud sound of the collision rang out as wind blew across the place. Krrhhh. Bang. Cracks still continued to spread across the place as the special class cadet continued to push down the massive structure using the arms it conjured. It still kept pressing down on that particular part of the battle ring and descending for several more seconds. The dome-like barrier covering the ring vibrated also. A smile appeared on his face as he was about to let go of it. Suddenly, more cracking sounds were heard. And this time, it wasn't coming from the ground. Instead, it was coming from the massive triangular structure. KRHHYKKK. Bang! A hole suddenly burst through the middle of the structure as Timmy came flying out of it with his body radiating with an immense reddish aura. The bluish triangular structure dimmed down and blasted apart completely. However, everyone's eyes were on Timmy, who had arrived in front of the special class cadet. Before the cadet could understand what was happening, transparent reddish walls of energy suddenly appeared around both of them. SSHHHRHHH. He felt his energy being drained at a very fast speed as the arms and legs he conjured disappeared. Sweehai. Timmy swung out his fist at this time. Bang! Although the special class cadet blocked it, he was still sent flying till he slammed through one of the reddish walls and landed on the other side of the battle ring. He spat out blood as he forcefully stood to his feet and tried to conjure another attack. However, he noticed that he was practically out of bloodline energy and couldn't use any large-scale attacks due to the previous one. Sweehai. Timmy arrived in front of him again and punched out. Bang! 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 Right before everyone's eyes, a special class cadet was turned into a punching bag. Timmy eventually knocked the special class out after a few more attacks. Almost all the cadets were in a state of disbelief as the AI announced Timmy to be the winner. A normal cadet had managed to win against a special class. Timmy started walking back to his sitting position with a confident look. He was still bleeding in several areas of his body that were exposed due to sharp slashes, but he totally ignored the medical team and said he was okay. The others' battles came to an end several minutes back with no other normal cadet winning. Everyone realized at this point that Timmy must have been quite powerful since, before, he was among the top 400 even though he wasn't a special class. Now that he had defeated this special class cadet, who happened to be placed 49th, their positions had now been exchanged. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The hype and discussions continued for a long time, even after other battles began. Timmy had suddenly become famous due to this and was now known as the Dark Horse. About 30 minutes later, after 2 more turns had gone by, Gustav finally saw his image again. At this time, EE and Eldris had also won their second fights earlier with ease. Gustav walked towards the third ring just like earlier amidst the background conversations of the cadets who spotted him. They wondered if the person who had challenged Gustav would show up or not after remembering how the last battle went. In a few seconds, a 5.5-foot-tall youngster stepped into the same battle ring as Gustav. The cadets spectating were surprised that this person didn't forfeit, but Gustav understood that none of the 3 cadets whose challenge he accepted would even think of forfeiting, no matter how badly he beat up his opponents. This was because the first one he battled was a spoiled rich kid who was overconfident, while the other 2 were interested in having Matilda's hand. There was no way the other 2 would back down. They wouldn't want to be seen as cowards by Matilda later. The youngster had white and blue-colored dreadlocks that were tied in a bun. I love Matilda. Even if I do not defeat you today, I will train better to do so next time, he said with a slightly shaky voice. All right, good luck, I guess, Gustav responded with a calm look. Begin. The instant the go-ahead was given, the youngster transformed into a bulky, lizard-like creature with the head of a bird. It has green, white, and blue scales, just like the youngster's hair color. However, this lizard-like creature was in a standing position with a 12 feet long and thick tail. He made a loud screeching noise before charging for Gustav. Gustav reacted in kind and dashed towards him as his arms increased in size, becoming that of the mutated bull. Partial mutation has been activated. SSHHHRRRYYYY. The youngster suddenly shot out black flames from his mouth before arriving in front of Gustav. Gustav swerved right and made a beeline towards the youngster with speed. He arrived in front of him and sent a punch straight to his guts. Bang! The instant the creature received the punch, it tilted forward slightly due to the force. Meanwhile, another punch was already heading for his head. Bang! Gustav slammed his right fist into the creature's head, causing him to fall flat on his face, cracking the hard ground. Spreeru. Blood scattered all across the place as a small dent appeared on the youngster's head, from which blood oozed. His body twitched severely as he laid on the ground for a few seconds before stopping. Oi oi. What's going on? Don't tell me he just defeated that youngster just like that. The entire crowd was in disbelief as they saw Gustav turn around and start walking back towards his seat. Chapter 407. The entire crowd was in disbelief as they saw Gustav turn around and start walking back towards his seat. The cadet looked quite fearsome compared to Gustav after his transformation, yet he was defeated in just 2 moves. Gustav's arms returned back to their initial size as he moved towards his initial sitting position. The medical team rushed to the battle ring to attend to the half-dead cadet, who practically had his head torn open by Gustav's punch. Many of the cadets that watched the brief match had terrified expressions on their faces as they stared at Gustav's nonchalant bearing. They had thought the battle would at least last longer than this due to how the last one went, but they had no idea that Gustav was just testing out his strength without making use of any transformational ability. A lot of them swore in their hearts not to challenge him from this day on unless they had a sudden boost in strength. The other battles continued within the neighboring rings. Gustav arrived back in his sitting position and watched the rest of the fight. At the moment, Glade happened to be among the other special class cadets that had their turns, and she was battling a regular cadet who looked familiar. Although Gustav figured that his next battle was probably going to be the toughest since it was with Dietrich, he wasn't really bothered as he watched Glade's duel with an undisturbed look. This particular familiar female figure Glade battled with had a short frame of almost 5 feet. She had indigo-colored hair that was so long, it reached the back of her calves. Her look was extremely arrogant and sharp as she and Glade clashed repeatedly. They seemed to be evenly matched. Gustav recognized this girl to be the same one that was trying to compete with him during the 5th phase within the underground ruins, Havrina. This girl really loved competition, and the look on her face as she battled Glade made that even more obvious. Her long hair floated in the air and extended, turning into blades that hacked at Glade repeatedly. Glade was currently holding onto 2 scythes made of red energy. She used these scythes to parry the attacks of the sharp blade-like hairs swinging towards her body. Bang, 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 bang. The battle ring was riddled with destruction as their attacks collided repeatedly. Glade formed many other red energy-like blades and leaped on one of them. Swihai, swihai, shwai. The red energy blades slashed towards Havrina's figure, violently pushing aside the multiple blade-like hairs swinging across the place. Glade dashed forward with speed on the red energy blade she conjured, making use of that opening to arrive before Havrina. She brandished her scythe, tightening her grip around the hilt intensely as she slashed forward towards Havrina's neck. Havrina was not able to recall her long hair back to protect herself fast enough, since they had just parried the rest of the long-range attacks she used earlier on. Just as Glade's scythe was about to make contact, the tip of the scythe was suddenly met with opposition. Tying. It was stopped a few inches away from her neck by an invisible force. Glade was surprised as she noticed the smirk on Havrina's face after the attack was stopped. Before Glade could make another move, she suddenly felt something sharp headed for her and quickly turned to the side. However, she wasn't fast enough as the invisible force sliced a small part of the skin from her shoulder off. Blood oozed down her sleeves. However, she was lucky enough that it was only a flesh wound. What in the world is that? Glade wondered as she repeatedly swerved after sensing the invisible sharp force swinging for her. Havrina still sliced off a part of Glade's hair since the sharp force was invisible. Havrina dashed forward after Glade and swung out her sharp claws towards her body, intending to inflict serious damage. Glade now had to dodge attacks of different kinds. The invisible sharp force, the sharp blade-like hairs, and even Havrina claws. Each swing was so powerful that the air rippled intensely. Although Glade took pride in the toughness of her green body, she could tell that if any of Havrina's attacks hit, she would definitely take a lot of damage. Gustav watched from his sitting position with God eyes activated. He could already see the invisible sharp line that kept slashing towards Glade. It had a strange whitish color, and it was extending from the back of Havrina's head. So it happened to be a strand of her hair? Why is it invisible? Gustav wondered as he figured this out. As the battle progressed, Glade was eventually riddled with so many cuts and tears all over her cadet uniform. It was initially white, but now there were red patches all over the place, and the exposed parts showed her injuries. She couldn't dodge everything Havrina was dishing out at the same time, which was why she was in her current state. The entire crowd was quite shocked that another normal cadet had such strength and was managing to give a top 40 special class cadet such troubles. Glade was still considered quite strong amongst other special class compared to the one team he defeated. So everyone could tell that Havrina would have been a special class by now if she fought with a weaker special class. Thump. Glade leaped backwards after dodging another round of attack and slid a few 50 feet backwards afterwards. She breathed in and out profusely while staring at Havrina, who also had hurried breathing. However, Havrina still looked crazy and hyped up as she stared at Glade in front. Come on, Greenie. Don't tell me that's all you got. She laughed with a look of ridicule while speaking. This little. I can't afford to lose. My special class title cannot be taken from me. She gritted her teeth as she thought. Her eyes looked across the spectators' area as she glanced at two familiar figures for barely a few moments. Chapter 408. Looks like I have to use it. So much for fighting with just my strength alone, Glade said as she brought out a star-shaped fingernail-sized object and placed it on her forehead. The reddish aura surrounding her was a bit similar to Timi's, and it increased with intensity after that as she conjured chains in her hands. Glade dashed forward again towards Havrina, and they clashed once again. The reddish chains in Glade's possession carried a rippling force that twisted the space around it as she swung it out. Fly. Fly. Fly high. Glade had become twice as fast as before and could not get hit due to the speed multiplier she got from the weapon's storage back at the base. In the blink of an eye, the red chains she conjured had tied Havrina's blade-like hairs together. Glade pulled the chain with all her might, drawing Havrina to herself as she spun around with her legs swung out. Havrina managed to block the attack even though she was taken by surprise. However, the tables had turned at this point. Havrina was no longer able to hit Glade after her speed was multiplied by 2. Glade kept attacking her repeatedly, and despite Havrina's high defense, she would occasionally receive hits. In a few more minutes, both of them were now in the same state. Both had injuries on their bodies and had almost run out of energy completely. Blood covered Havrina's face in blood as she breathed in and out profusely, but she was still smiling crazily while Glade's speed multiplier had run out of energy. Both of them were on their last straws, and neither of them had managed to inflict more damage than the other. Glade and Havrina separated and stared at each other intensely before activating their most powerful attack. A massive cylindrical-shaped structure was being formed above Glade as she raised her hand. Havrina's hair suddenly started increasing in length and quantity, turning into multiple sharp blades that covered a large space as they shot forward. Glade finished conjuring this massive reddish structure and also swung it forward intensely. Bang! The instant they both collided, the force created sent ripples across the place that slammed into them both. Bam! Bam! Glade and Havrina's bodies slammed forcefully into the barrier on the south and north sides before passing out. Silence. There was a brief silence as the cadets witnessing the battle waited for them to stand to their feet, but that didn't happen. The match has ended in a tie, due to both cadets knocking each other out, Officer Cole announced. Chatter. 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 The place instantly turned noisy after the announcement was made. After the barrier deactivation, the medical team swooped in to take Glade and Havrina away. Dash, I thought Glade was going to win. Dash, they actually knocked each other out? Who knew Havrina was this strong? Dash, well, she was among the top 70. Even though she's not a special class, she was really close to being one on the rankings. Dash, she should have challenged a weaker younger class. The spectating cadets discussed amongst themselves with tones and expressions of disbelief. This was another match that the cadets wouldn't forget. After today, everyone was interested in knowing what the instructor's decision would be since the match ended in a tie. The turns continued after this as the next cadets found their way to the battle rings. Matilda had her second round in the next few turns, and the opponent didn't give her as much trouble as before. About an hour later, it was EE's turn again. However, the same event played out during Falco's second turn. Since E defeated his last two opponents in grand style, his third opponent grew cold feet and decided not to show. Although a few battles previously had proven that the special class cadets were not undefeatable, most of the normal cadets could not boast of being as strong as someone like Timi or Havrina. They knew just where their strengths lie. He left back to his seat after the 10 seconds countdown was completed. After a few more minutes, his turn ended, and it was time for Gustav to head towards the platform again. Ildris also happened to have his third match at the same time with a slightly popular normal cadet who was a top 100. Gustav arrived in the ring after a few moments and waited for Dietrich to show up. Dietrich showed up after a few seconds and walked into the battle ring. He smiled at Gustav and nodded. "Let's have a fair match," he voiced out. "You might want to do those weird pokes before we begin because this time I won't be giving you the opportunity to do so." Gustav responded with this. "Thanks for the generous offer. Then I would be polite and do that now," Dietrich said before he started poking different parts of his body. The wind surrounding him suddenly turned weird and began to circulate around him. Gustav's eyes squinted as he stared at Dietrich. "That's much more powerful than before," he noted before also transforming slightly. On Gustav's right hand, sharp red claws phased out of his fingertips as his entire arm expanded and turned reddish with furs covering it, while his left arm transformed into a muscular brown one. His body size increased to over 7 feet in height as his thighs and calves expanded with small 2-inch tusks protruding out of them. "Begin." The instant the go-ahead was given, Gustav darted forward without activating dash. Everything in the surroundings slowed down as he noticed that his speed with transformation and without using dash was now similar to his speed making use of dash without any transformation. As Gustav punched forward towards Dietrich, he conjured a wall of strong wind in front of him, which proceeded to slow down Gustav's attack. Dietrich made use of that opportunity to dash to the side as chopped towards Gustav's left rib area, causing a blade-shaped air pressure to form, hacking towards him with intensity. Chapter 409. Dietrich made use of that opportunity to dash to the side as he slashed towards Gustav's left rib area, causing a blade-shaped air pressure to form, hacking towards him with intensity. Gustav turned towards the side and quickly sent out a kick in response. His muscular leg swung forward, ripping through the blade-like air pressure before colliding with Dietrich's palm. Bam! Kryychhk. Low bone-cracking sounds rang out as Dietrich's arm was sent swinging backwards forcefully after the collision. On Dietrich's face, a slight look of pain was evident as his body slid backwards. However, Gustav wasted no time chasing after Dietrich and reached out his hand to grab him. Dietrich stretched his hand and created a ball of air in his palm. Everything within the vicinity started being sucked into this ball as he shot it out, causing the ground to be split open due to its traction force. Gustav felt the tugging force from the ball of air pulling him towards the side as he dashed forward. Size manipulation has been activated. Gustav's arms that were being tugged suddenly increased in size, becoming as thick as trucks. Gustav drove his fist through the ball of air, destroying it in one fell swoop, sending it forward. Kryychhk. The ground split open as his massive fist traveled forward, causing the air to ripple. Dietrich, who thought he had managed to escape from Gustav's range due to the initial stunt he pulled, was surprised when he noticed the massive fist, with the size similar to that of a truck headed for his face. The wind surrounding him turned fiercer as he tried to use a wall of wind to block the massive fist. Unfortunately for him, the fist ripped through the wall of air easily and slammed into his body, catapulting him backwards. His body was tossed hundreds of feet across the air like a rag doll as he slammed into the barrier on the other end. 1000 EP. Size manipulation has been deactivated. Gustav quickly deactivated size manipulation after noticing how much energy he had lost from increasing his arms to that size. Although size manipulation helped in increasing his strength by a wide margin, he refrained from using it because of the way it drained energy. Dietrich slammed into the other side and landed on the ground. He wiped the blood leaking down the corners of his lips. "I opened the second gate right off the bat yet he wrecked me in less than 30 seconds. If I didn't have my protective vest worn underneath, I'd have received more damage than this. Dietrich was astounded because the last time he battled Gustav with the second step opened, he wasn't defeated so easily. And what the hell is with that ability? He can increase the length of any part of his body? Dietrich wasn't the only one dumbfounded by this. The spectating cadets were as well, because no one had ever seen Gustav use this ability. Dietrich noticed Gustav up ahead and headed for him quickly. At the same time, Dietrich started poking different parts of his body again. Zwee-wee. The wind surrounding him increased immensely, blowing his hair upwards as he stood to his feet. The blood leaking from different parts of his body earlier stopped, and immense energy radiated around him. At this point, everyone figured that whenever he poked different parts of his body like that, he would have something similar to a level up. Both of them dashed out towards each other with speed, and it was obvious that Dietrich's speed had become way more than before. He sucked air into his mouth and started shooting them out like bullets. Pum, 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 pum. The wind was practically invisible, but Gustav was able to sense the disruption in the space around him, which was why he was able to dodge them as they bolted across the air. Boom, boom, boom. The small, round, compressed air exploded outwards with intensity the moment he dodged the first one. Gustav had already expected this and finally activated Dash. Dash has been activated. Swoosh. As he sped past the area of effect, the ground behind split open as cracks appeared all over the place after the wind explosion. Gustav dashed past every single one of the compressed wind that was shot outwards and arrived right in front of Dietrich while stretching out his right palm. I've always wanted to create this. A milky glow suddenly surrounded Gustav's palm. Atomic disintegration has been activated. It suddenly brightened immensely as a 2-foot-long whitish blade formed in his grasp, which he swung out with force. Dietrich sensed danger coming from the milky-colored blade that was suddenly formed in Gustav's hand and reacted by sending slashes out with his palm in a chop format. A powerful wind slash-like blade was created from that which collided with that of Gustav's. Swee-hi-hi. To his surprise, not only was his wind blade divided into two halves, but it also disappeared the moments after Gustav's slashed through it. Swee-hi-hi. The remnant of the energy after Gustav swung it kept traveling through the air and slammed into Dietrich's chest, cutting a 13 inches gash all across his chest in a diagonal format. Blurg. Dietrich vomited out blood once again as his body was sent flying through the air as blood poured out of the cut. My protective vest was torn through, just like that. His eyes widened in realization and pain as he flew through the air. Gustav dashed forward and jumped up with speed as he arched his left arm backwards. Thum. He leaped upwards with immense force and threw his fist up towards Dietrich's back. Bang! His fist slammed heavily into Dietrich's back, sending him flying upwards before he crashed into the protective dome. Bam! His body started free falling again after he slammed into it, and Gustav once again jumped upwards before doing a 360-degree spin with his right leg stretched forward. Chapter 4:10. Bang! His foot slammed into Dietrich's jaw, catapulting him once again towards the far end of the dome. Pieces of teeth and blood flew out of his mouth as his body spun severally in midair before slamming head-on into the barrier. The crowd expressed looks of pity as they saw the state Dietrich's body was in after the crash. The sound of bones cracking was loud enough, so they could understand the state of pain Dietrich was currently in. Once again, Gustav created an overbearing and majestic atmosphere. Dietrich was someone who lasted longer than a lot of special class cadets in the accumulation of Serhavo, yet he was still beaten quite easily. Gustav turned around and started moving towards the far end of the battle ring. When he got there, he was about to step forward to leave the ring, but he noticed that the dome hadn't been lifted yet. He sighed and turned around to see Dietrich suddenly open his eyes from 1,000 feet away. Turns out he didn't pass out just yet, Gustav realized. At this time, the spectators also realized the same thing as they saw Dietrich struggling to stand to his feet. Dash, what's the point? Is he just looking to get beaten up again? Most of them had this thought in their minds. Dietrich quickly raised his hands and began to poke his body parts once again. God Eyes has been activated. I'm quite curious to see how the improvement in strength will be this time. This time Gustav didn't try to stop him. Instead, he watched with an observant look. That's a big jump, Gustav said internally with a slightly disturbed expression. He was reading Dietrich's energy level god eyes and noticed that his internal energy numbers increased by 2. This time I opened gate 5. He'll stop here for today. I have to find out just how much of my strength he can handle, Dietrich said internally as he breathed in air with a look of determination. I wonder if he can keep going. But it will be better to end it this time. Gustav was curious, but he really didn't want to let his curiosity get the better of him. Both of them stared at each other from the far ends of the battle ring with looks of intensity before dashing forward with speed. Swihai, Swy. Right now, their speed was at the same level as they sped across the place. Gustav's head transformed into that of the serpentine mixed breed as he gathered purplish energy in his mouth area and shot it out. Dietrich conjured a swirling mass of air and also sent it forward. Boom! Both forces collided and canceled each other out, blasting chunks of the ground of the battle ring into the air. However, this destruction did not hinder them in the slightest as they arrived before each other a few moments later. Swing! Swing! Gustav's palm and that of Dietrich's collided with intensity, causing both of them to arch backwards a little from the force of the collision. Gustav pushed himself forward again and threw out a fist. Swerve! Now Dietrich was fast enough to dodge his fist, and also threw out his fist packed with a swirling mass of air gathering around it. Gustav moved slightly to the side and used the back of his left palm to slap on Dietrich's wrist, changing the trajectory of the punch before squatting slightly and throwing his fist upwards. Swai! Dietrich quickly shifted back a bit, causing Gustav's fist to miss him by a centimeter. However, the instant Gustav's fist missed, he pushed forward his elbow, which ended up slamming into Dietrich's nose. Bam! Dietrich moaned in pain, but as his back arched backwards due to the hit, he grabbed hold of Gustav's hand. Swihai! His arm was suddenly surrounded by a massive swirling pool of air which pulled him towards the side and slammed him into the ground. Gustav was taken by surprise with that attack and instantly enlarged his body before the swirling air could toss his body around again. Swihai! He kicked out instantly, causing his leg to slam into Dietrich's body. Foom! Dietrich's body was once again sent flying through the air. However, unlike the last time, he didn't seem to have sustained any big injuries as he did a flip in midair and landed on his feet several hundred feet backwards. Gustav's deactivated size manipulation after getting rid of the swirling air. Still, now he had lost another 1,000 energy points. His strength is now very close to mine, without any other added activations, Gustav noted. They lunged at each other again, and once more, fierce blows were thrown. Bang! 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 Although Dietrich was holding on better than the previous times, Gustav would still occasionally land hits on him, so he sustained little injuries over time. Sprint has been activated. Gustav finally activated Sprint, increasing his speed by 2 times. Swoosh! Dietrich was unable to follow his attacks anymore at this point. Bang! Gustav landed a clean hit on his gut with his leg before dashing forward again. Swihai! His fist traveled in an upwards motion as he squatted slightly. Bam! More teeth were sent flying out of Dietrich's mouth along with blood as his body was catapulted upwards after Gustav's fist slammed heavily into his jaw. Gustav leaped upwards again and raised his leg high while in midair before slamming it down onto Dietrich's chest. Dietrich made an X sign with his arms trying to block the hit. However, the instant collision was made. KRHHYKKK. His arms were smashed apart as the kick slammed head onto his chest, sending him spiraling down as his chest caved in, and he coughed out blood. Bang! Dietrich once again slammed onto the ground of the battle ring. The instant his body bounced back up from the collision, Gustav landed on the ground. Everything around him slowed down as he stared at Dietrich's body ascending slowly from the cracked ground after colliding with it. His mouth was opened, and his eyes slightly widened as blood shot out of different places from his body. Combination has been activated. Sprint plus dash. Chapter 411. Sprint plus dash. The The instant he reached out and took a step forward, the place vibrated. He grabbed onto Dietrich's head and raised his body high before slamming it into the ground and dashing forward. Bang! Krrhyyyyyrrhhh. The ground was being split open as Gustav ran across the place while burying Dietrich's head in the ground. He reached a part of the ring and leaped upwards. He arrived at over 500 feet in the air while still holding onto Dietrich's body. As he reached the limit in the air and started free falling, he held Dietrich's head and pointed it downwards as they fell. Bang! He brutally slammed his body into the ground, creating a 3 feet deep crater. Dust and debris scattered across the place, reducing the visuality of the environment around the battle ring. The spectators couldn't see through the dust and debris. They were curious since they couldn't hear any more sounds. After a few seconds, the dust covering everywhere began to reduce. They noticed a silhouette walking out of the dust-filled area, and as expected, it was Gustav. He was currently moving towards the other end of the battle ring. The dome covering the ring had been deactivated. When the dust cleared completely, everyone could see Dietrich's unconscious body buried at the bottom of the 3 feet deep craters. His body was covered in bloodstains, and his mouth was wide open with only a few visible teeth and many gaps left. Dietrich was actually very suave and handsome-looking, but at the moment, no one was able to trace his current look to his initial look. He also happened to be quite popular among the cadets due to his high-ranking and magnanimous behavior. They had expected that he would be defeated, but not in this particularly disgraceful manner. However, when they thought about it, they realized that every cadet Gustav had fought today was defeated in the most brutal and disgraceful manner. Gustav was the type that wouldn't stop until he was sure he had totally destroyed whatever was standing in his way. His determination to utterly crush his opponents made his battles brutal. Even after his attacks had caused a lot of damage, he would still continue until he was sure that whatever he was battling with would stay down, leaving it or them in a state of inability to battle. If this was a real-life scenario, everyone could tell that Dietrich and the others would be dead by now. Gustav arrived in his seat later on. He made use of atomic disintegration to remove the bloodstains on his hands and some parts of his body. Of course, the medical team had started treating Dietrich, who happened to have the most serious injuries among all the cadets Gustav had battled today. Because Gustav took a lot of time fighting Dietrich because other battles had already ended. Eldris also won his duel as expected and didn't take as much time as the others. Everyone that fought Eldris today realized that the power of their attacks reduced in his presence. None of them knew exactly what his bloodline ability was. Still, the reduction in power of their attacks was something they realized. He still didn't open his eyes when fighting anyone. His attacks were usually gentle and less brutal like that of Gustav. However, they always packed quite the punch. The last opponent he battled was laid out in 3 hits. Minutes later, Falco also had his last duel. As expected, his alter ego totally ended the battle in a short duration. Since this was literally the last bout, and some cadets had already fought their last duel for the day, the event was slowly ending. However, Elevera still hadn't had her duel yet. Among all the other duels with the special class cadets, besides Gustav, Falco and Chad were also quite brutal to their opponents, soliciting fear in many of the normal cadets' minds. Chad didn't even activate his bloodline throughout the battles. He defeated his opponents quite easily. Right now, he had just left the battle ring after the last opponent failed to show up. Gustav was particularly focused on this turn because Angie was battling a tricky opponent. This normal cadet was able to turn any part of the ground into an explosive. Angie had been speeding all across the battle ring for a while now, because wherever she stepped on was like a landmine and would instantly explode. So the moment she stopped running and stood in one spot, kaboom! The force of the explosion would blast her across the place. What made things even tougher was the fact that this particular cadet could also phase into the ground. So he was currently hiding underneath the ground of the battle ring, which made it harder for Angie to get to him. He could also change spots while being under the ground. So Angie wanted to be sure of the spot he was in, particularly before making her move. Boom, boom, boom. 3 more explosions occurred within the battle ring as Angie dashed in a zigzag manner across the place. Her fast silver-like figure dashed straight right out of the explosions unscathed. So hush. Even though the explosion was fast, It was only happening in slow motion in Angie's line of sight. The pattern of the explosion. Sometimes when I change locations from end to end, it takes time for them to start blasting again. Angie noticed and dashed towards the far west of the battle ring. She arrived at around 2,000 feet away from her location, and just as she had noted, the explosion didn't happen for the next 3.5 seconds before it started blasting out again. She would purposely slow down her speed and go faster again. All this was so she could confirm her theory. Whenever the explosions doesn't happen the instant I change locations, leaving a distance of over 1,000 feet behind, it means he is within that vicinity and will be affected by the explosion, Angie thought as she dashed in a zigzag format across the place once again. Chapter 412. Her third horn suddenly grew from her head as her speed increased exponentially. Phew-whoosh. Her speed was causing air splits across the place. Whitish energy gathered around her body in a circular format as she moved across the place. The cadets spectating had widened eyes as they noticed her speed and wondered what the whitish energy gathering around her was. As she arrived at the southeastern side of the ring where the edge was, she prepared herself to dash towards the far north side of the ring. Boom, boom, boom. The explosions were still happening around her here. He should be somewhere around there right now, she assumed as she dashed forward with speed. Zoom. Still carrying the circular mass of whitish energy surrounding her as she moved, Angie arrived at the far northern side of the ring. The instant she noticed the explosion delayed for 1 second, she released the whitish energy gathered around her figure. Thwaiwaya. Shruram. It was like an epitome of destruction as the whitish energy spread across the place, destroying the entire vicinity around her. The grounds were split open and disintegrated as the whitish energy touched them. Kyrier. There was a loud scream in the vicinity a moment later as the body of a person was sent flying outwards. The whitish energy covered the entirety of the battle ring before it disappeared. The body that flew outwards earlier had slammed into the barrier, and the person had fallen unconscious. Angie stood in place as she opened her eyes and looked around. Where she was currently standing was the only place in the entire battle ring that was still intact. It was practically like an extended pole at the moment, since the rest of the vicinity had been leveled by over 7 feet. Everything around her had caved in. It has gotten more powerful? Even Angie was surprised at the strength of this move because, formerly, it wasn't this strong. The cadets in the vicinity had wide open mouths. Most of them had no idea that she could do this. They thought she was just a mixed blood with super speed. The cadet she was battling with was laid out on the floor several thousand feet away, naked. His uniform, along with the protective vest he wore underneath, had been completely incinerated, and he was covered in injury and blood. The spectating cadets had open mouths as they stared at the destruction. Dash, how is she not top 10? One of them voiced out with a disbelieving look. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The whole place became quite noisy as the spectators spoke to each other. Angie, who had won her battle, still stood in place with widened eyes as she stared in the direction of the unconscious body. Her body trembled slightly as her sight turned a little blurry. She breathed in and out profusely before falling to her knees. Blurg. Angie started vomiting out the contents of her stomach. Gasp. Dash, what's wrong with her? Dash, hey, is she sick or something? The cadets spectating wondered out loud as they noticed this. Gustav stood to his feet with a worried expression while staring at the platform area. Swoov. An officer dived into the battle ring to attend to her. In a few seconds, he brought her out of the ring with him. It still looked like she was in a dizzy state. The other cadet, too, was also taken off the battle ring and was attended to by the medical personnel. They still couldn't believe so much destruction could be caused by a first-year cadet. The ground started to mend themselves back as the orb floating above started displaying different images once again. Gustav sat down back once again. Hee, looks like you still care. He laughed lightly and spoke the moment Gustav took his seat. What? Gustav exclaimed with a look of confusion. Didn't you say that you would no longer care about her? Responded with a cheeky smile. I don't, Gustav denied and closed his eyes before resting his back against the chair. Of course you don't. Kept laughing. Minutes went by, and finally, the last turn came. It was finally Elevera's time to duel. Since she had just one challenger, this was her first and last battle for today. The eyes of everyone spectating were focused on her as she walked down from the west area of the spectators' corner. It was as if the others who also had their turns now had turned invisible. Only she hogged the spotlight at the moment. She arrived in one of the battle rings after a few moments and waited for her challenger to arrive. In a few seconds, a cadet with spiky orange-colored hair walked into the stage. He had a kind of goofy vibe as he stared at Elevera with a smile. "Don't go easy on me. I believe my rival is stronger than you are," he voiced out. Elevera raised one eyebrow up with a look of confusion as she heard that. "Your rival?" she questioned. Back in the spectators' area, Gustav, Timmy, Angie, Matilda, and Falco had surprised expressions on their faces as they noticed the opponent. "Rhea," they all voiced out with looks of disbelief. "That idiot." Timmy's face palmed from his location, while shaking his head with a look of pity. Out of everyone to challenge, he decided to go for her? What is he smoking? Voiced out loud. Elevera and Rhea gazed at each other for a while before the go-ahead was given. "Begin." Rhea instantly lunged forward. Foom. Bria hi. The instant Rhea stomped on the floor, it parted way and opened up. Pieces of the ground began to pull towards him and wrap around his body as he dashed forward. Just as he arrived in front of Elevera, his entire body had been covered by rocky hardness. "Take this," he voiced out as he punched forward towards her. Elevera touched her head tie. "No, that would be an overkill," she said to herself before smoothly swerving to the side to dodge Rhea's first attack. Chapter 4:13. Elevera touched her head tie. "No, that would be an overkill," she said to herself before smoothly swerving to the side to dodge Rhea's first attack. Foom. The rock-like fist passed by Elevera's side as she moved away. Rhea gritted his teeth as he retracted his fist and threw out another one as quickly as he could. Elevera slowly descended and shifted to the side, causing the fist to pass over her head. Swee. Elevera kept moving back and forth, left and right across the place, dodging every of Rhea's attacks. Her movement was both fluid and fast. It was almost like she was dancing as she dodged with ease. Rhea was starting to get frustrated after throwing fists and kicks for the last 2 minutes without managing to land one. He was getting even more frustrated at the fact that Elevera didn't even retort in any manner. "Hiya!" Rhea screamed out as he suddenly stomped his feet on the ground again, causing the battle ring to tremble. Grew. Fly. The ground surrounding Elevera's feet suddenly caved in, and her legs were instantly covered up by rocks and held in place. Swoosh! Rhea suddenly dashed forward after Elevera's feet had been trapped by the solid ground. Foom! He leaped up and threw a flying kick towards her belly region. Why? Elevera suddenly bent backwards with speed, causing her back to nearly touch the ground as she dodged Rhea's kick. Rhea's eyes widened slightly as he leaped over her and landed on the ground behind her after missing. He suddenly turned around with speed, swinging out his leg towards her body that was still bent backwards. Elevera straightened herself like a pole at that moment with speed. Once again, Rhea missed and threw out a fist towards Elevera again in compensation. Even while being trapped by the ground, she twisted to the side, dodging his fists once again. The cadets spectating had shocked looks on their faces. Even after trapping her, Rhea could not land a hit. He threw fists at her several times, but her flexibility allowed her to dodge in ways that seemed impossible. Rhea descended at that moment and swung out his rocky leg towards hers. It was at this moment that Elevera pulled her left leg forcefully from the rocky entrapment on the ground. Grhi. As Rhea's massive right leg swept forward, Elevera's left leg had already been raised up. The instant it swept underneath her raised left leg, Elevera suddenly brought her leg down with force. Bam! A loud sound reverberated across the place as Elevera's left foot stomped on Rhea's right leg forcefully, holding it in place. HNNGGH. Rhea groaned as he felt the pain from his legs, even though they were covered by rocks. The instant she stomped on his leg, Rhea's body was trapped in place on the ground, and Elevra proceeded to pull out her second leg from the entrapment before swinging it forward with speed. Bang! Her right leg crashed into Ria's chest, sending him flying into the distance. The rocks around that part of his body crumbled to pieces as he flew across the air, spitting out blood. Ria slammed into the barrier on the other side and fell to the ground afterwards. The crowd was not surprised at the current outcome, but they were still wowed by her strength. Ria's line of sight turned blurry as he raised his head up and stared at Elevra's moving figure in the distance. "Stand down. Don't embarrass yourself any further," she said with a kind but dominant voice as she walked forward. HNG. Ria groaned and spat out blood to the side before pushing himself up. He cleaned his mouth and nose of the blood leaking out. "Who do you think you are to tell me that? Secluded princess," Ria voiced out after standing up with an angry smile. Elevra's facial expression changed slightly as she heard that. "Don't call me that," she voiced out. "I will call you whatever the hell I damn want," Ria said before stomping his feet on the ground again to reinforce his rocky suit. Ria swiped his arms forward, causing the ground on both sides of Elevra to suddenly pull out and form walls. "Pa!" He slapped his palms together, causing the walls to close up with force, with Elevra within. Ria smiled after the successful sneak attack, but in the next second, his smile froze. Bang! Both walls were suddenly smashed apart as Elevra appeared from within the dust created unscathed. "You'll have to do better than that to cause me harm," she said provocatively as she kept walking forward. Ria gritted his teeth and dashed forward while stretching out his right hand. CRRYHHKK. CRRYHHKK. The ground below once again began to crack open, and rock fragments floated into the air as if being pulled by something. Bam! 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 The rocks slammed into each other and merged, forming a gigantic boulder full of cracks that kept increasing in size as Ria dashed forward. The rock's fragments and broken parts of the battle ring were still being pulled upwards. In a matter of a few seconds, it had become as massive as a building. Ria suddenly leaped up with speed and spun in the air before landing a very heavy kick on the massive, building-like boulder. Bang! The massive boulder traveled forward with intense speed and velocity towards Elevra, who was a few thousand feet ahead. Flyaway. As Ria landed on the ground, he squatted slightly and put both his arms on his right. His face squeezed up with intensity as he pushed his hands forward with force. The rock suddenly transformed into black color as its speed suddenly multiplied by 2. The entire vicinity turned hot the instant this happened. Elevra was surprised at the sudden acceleration of the rock, which was only about 50 feet away, when it transformed, and its speed suddenly doubled. It arrived in front of her in an instant, causing the temperature of her vicinity to increase with intensity as her uniform started peeling off. Chapter 414. Elevra's arms suddenly emitted a mysterious purplish glow as she pushed her palms forward. Bang! Ria smiled as he imagined the rock crashing into her from his point of view, since it kept moving forward with speed even after arriving before her. Meanwhile, Elevra was currently sliding back as her legs dug into the ground, causing a line of cracks to appear due to the immense force of the rock, which was still pushing her backwards. Elevra, seeing that this wasn't working, raised her right leg up as she slid back and stomped it on the ground with force. Bang! Her leg broke apart that part of the battle ring, digging 3 feet into the ground as she clenched tightly into the hot building-sized boulder. She firmly stood her ground and raised the boulder up above her head, preventing it from going further forward. Ria's eyes widened as he stared at Elevra up ahead, lifting the massive building-like boulder he created. He was filled with frustration as he raised his hand and made a falling gesture. Elevra suddenly felt the weight of the rock multiply by 2, pressing down on her immensely. Her legs buckled a bit as she was surprised by the sudden weight increase. Grhayai. The battle ring was being leveled due to this, causing cracks to spread all over the place from her position as her legs began to sink into the ground since it was giving way. The cadets witnessing the battle realized that Ria was also quite strong, since he could manipulate rocks however he felt. To everyone's surprise, Elevra raised her right foot and put it forward before raising her left and putting it in front of her right. She walked out of the ditch, still carrying the massive, building-like boulder. However, due to the weight of the rock, which was still increasing by the second, her legs once again sank into the ground as they gave way. Rhea stomped his feet on the ground once more, causing the ground to wrap and tighten around Elevera's legs. Elevera was once again trapped with the massive load she was also carrying. This time, I will land a hit, Rhea voiced out with a tone of determination before dashing forward. Sohush. Elevera stared at his frame as he made a beeline towards her. Rhea had his right arm arched back to the limit as he prepared to land a heavy hit on Elevera. The instant he arrived in front of her, he swung out his fist fiercely. However, at the same moment, Elevera also started bringing down the heavy building-like boulder she was lifting with force. The boulder descended with heavy pressure upon Rhea as he swung out his fist. It was so unexpected, and the speed at which it descended was also unprecedented. Bang! A massive sound of collision rang out as the entire battle ring was suddenly covered in debris and dust. The cadets witnessing the battle could feel the tremors from their sitting position, which shocked them immensely. They couldn't imagine just how much force Elevera used in dropping the massive boulder that would cause them to feel the tremor from their sitting position. As the dust cleared up, everyone could see pieces of rock fragments scattered all across the place. Rhea and Elevera were standing about 100 feet away from each other. They gazed at each other with weird expressions. Rhea had parts of his rocky armor broken apart again, and blood could be seen dripping down exposed parts of his body. He was fortunate that his bloodline ability lay in the manipulation of rocks. If this wasn't the case, he would have been way more injured than his current state. He realized just how much of a monster Elevera was pulling that off. She used such a massive and heavy structure as an attack source, yet her attack was still faster than his fist. "Just give it up," she said as she pulled her legs out of the ground entrapments once again and started walking forward. "Don't tell me what to do," Rhea shouted out and dashed forward with an angry look once again. Elevera shook her head with a look of pity as her right arm emitted the purplish glow again. Rhea arrived in front of her as he transferred all the rocks on his body to his fist area, causing it to increase in size immensely. Swaiwai. He swung it forward with force. Elevera arched her arm back gracefully after sliding to the side and squatted slightly. Rhea's fist glided over her right shoulder as she swung her palm forward. Boom! It sounded like an explosive went off as Elevera's palm slammed heavily into the middle of Rhea's chest. A chain effect was created, as his sternum fractured instantly and cracks spread from that part of his chest to his ribs area, and then other internal organs around that part of his body were also affected. His back caved out as he spat out a jet of blood, while the force shot him straight into the air. Whoosh! Bang! Rhea slammed into the dome on the other side, and to everyone's surprise, his body broke through it. The people on the west side of the arena quickly shifted away as they noticed his body flying in their direction. Bang! He slammed into the seating area, causing a cloud of dust to spread across the surroundings and destroying a bunch of chairs in the process. Chatter! 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 The entire place erupted in chaos after witnessing this incident. Elevera stood in the battle ring and stared at the direction in which Rhea's body was sent flying. She shrugged her shoulders and proceeded to walk out of the ring while dusting her uniform. The medical team quickly swooped into action and went to attend to Rhea. Timmy shook his head from his seating position. That idiot. Just what did he aim to achieve with this? He muttered underneath his breath with a look of disappointment. Well, this was pretty much expected, he voiced out besides Gustav. Yeah. Why did he do that, though? Falco wondered out loud. Maybe he was looking to prove himself, Ildris said with a low and mysterious tone. They stared at him with a slightly confused look, but before they could say anything else, Gustav spoke. She is stronger than I am. Chapter 4:15. They stared at him with a slightly confused look, but before they could say anything else, Gustav spoke. She is stronger than I am. EE and Falco turned to stare at Gustav as they heard him say that with looks of surprise. But the probability of her defeating me is 50-50. Gustav added. I can't really predict how things will end up eventually, Gustav explained. They realized that Gustav was talking about the physical aspect with this little explanation of his. That attack of hers. She barely used 60% of her original arm force. Gustav had been watching the battle between her and Rhea with God eyes, so he could practically see how the energy within their bodies circulated. Eldris wasn't surprised to hear this since he knew firsthand just how monstrous Alevra's strength was. She was the first special class cadet to reach the Gilbert rank, and it had only been a month since they arrived here, and she was way more powerful than a normal first or second step Gilbert ranked mixed blood would be. Gustav was interested in sparring with Alevra one of these days. He felt like he might have truly found a peer on his level besides Falco, and Eldris. Although he decided he wouldn't be the one to initiate it since right now, he had more important things to worry about. Indrik was back. He had to secretly train Vera on the usage of her original ability and was still in the process of doing research about her origins. He found out that her cousins, Damon and Grimm, were true mixed bloods, which had him wondering why she was the odd one out in the family. Also, Angie was practically going through some kind of internal issue at the moment after inflicting more damage than intended on her opponent. This is the first time she attacked without holding out. She didn't kill, but she already can't bear the feeling that comes with inflicting such damage on a person. This might be tougher than I thought, but this is a good start, Gustav said internally with a contemplative look. In a few more minutes, the special class duel ended. It was a really crazy experience because many of the cadets didn't expect most of the scenarios they had witnessed here today. One normal cadet had managed to become a special class cadet today, and another one had managed to bring their battle to a tie. At the moment, Glade and Havrina had been treated. They were still out of energy, but their injuries had been treated. Officer Cole walked up to the platform to address the crowd of cadets. He mentioned that Timmy would now take the spot of the special class cadet he defeated, and also mentioned the new update of the first-year rankings. Top 400 first years 1. Alevra Tikis plus 10,000 points 2. Eldris Golding plus 8,000 points 3. Gustav Crimson plus 8,000 points 4. Chad Buruku plus 7,900 points 5. Chutlu Evans plus 7,800 points 6. Emmanuel plus 7,500 points 7. Falco. The list continued like that, displaying those who had moved up the rankings and those that had gone below. Chad had a squeezed-up face as he stared at his rank. TCH, faulty AI calculation, he said with a look of displeasure. Chad was not happy with this and made a decision in his mind as he stared in the direction of Gustav's seating position. Hell yeah. Guess who's number 6 now? Woo. Stood up with a look of joy as he shouted out. Silence, everyone turned in their direction to stare at them. Who was about to say something else, had his mouth wide open as he noticed the stares. He slowly sat down with a wry smile. Carry on, he said with a slight look of embarrassment. Falco face-bombed before bursting into snickers with Eldris. Gustav couldn't maintain his poker face after seeing EE's embarrassed expression. He also laughed lightly. The crowd soon went back to focusing on Officer Cole's speech. Damn, I almost shit my pants. What's with those stares? EE said with a light laugh. Maybe try keeping your excitement inside next time, Gustav said while shaking his head with a wry smile. Nah, y'all are just too uptight, EE replied before turning to look up at the rankings again. Mama, just watch. Emma make you proud, he said internally with a smile. Now for the tie between Glade and Havrina. The leading board has decided to make Havrina a special class cadet, Officer Cole suddenly announced after he finished speaking on the ranking board. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The whole place turned loud as they heard that. That means Glade is no longer a special class. Oh well, a decision had to be made. I think they were both spectacular. From her sitting position, Angie had a worried look after hearing that. Glade had not returned to her sitting position, which was besides Angie due to the treatment they were undergoing. However, Angie had tried going over to the medical rooms underneath the arena, but Glade had instructed that no one should be allowed in. It would seem she wasn't interested in seeing anyone right now. Havrina is now a special class cadet, Officer Cole voiced out. However, Glade is also still a special class cadet. They have been placed on probation. They will both face each other again next month, and whoever wins keeps their special class title, Officer Cole announced. Chatter, chatter, chatter. The whole place turned noisy again after the cadets heard that. They hadn't been expecting this, but now they were looking forward to both girls' rematch next month. It looked like the MBO was really pitting cadets against cadets, which encouraged and created a lot of competition among themselves. Gustav could understand why the MBO would favor competition against one another here. After all, competition pushes people to want to do better and get better. Chapter 4:16. In this way, every cadet will want to improve themselves since they don't want to get left behind by their peers, which would, in turn, allow everyone to improve together. It was understandable why the MBO had the most powerful force on the planet. After a few more announcements, the cadets were allowed to leave the battle arena to their residential locations. Glade later came out of her medical room. However, it was obvious that she was in a very bad mood. Don't worry, you'll get her next time, Angie and Matilda comforted her. Glade really hated losing. As they left, they bumped into Havrina, who still had a happy and playful smile while moving towards the special class cadets' residence. Hee, Greenie, prepare yourself very well for next month. I won't be so nice next time, she said while passing by their sides. Glade gritted her teeth as her green veins popped out of her skin. Well, see, she responded with a venomous glare. Rhea, on the other hand, was still wrapped in bandages and kept within one of the medical wards. Hey, so no one came to see me. How rude of them, he shouted out to the lady in white uniform by the side. Maybe if you weren't so much of a loud mouth, they'd do that, she said while administering his medicine and moving out of the ward. TCH, I will win next time, he voiced out. Gustav and the others moved towards their residential areas after the special class duel ended. It had lasted for over 6 hours, and presently it was evening time. Their group was practically a fearsome one as everyone gave way for them while they moved across the place. Most of them had jittery looks when they stared at Gustav especially. He may have been ranked below number 2, but not only did he get the same number of added points with Eldris, but his battles were also the most brutal ones they had witnessed today. Gustav, Eldris, EE, and Falco, it was practically a group of powerhouses moving together. In a few more minutes, they arrived at their residence, and everyone quickly moved towards Gustav's room. They happened to bump into Indrik, who was coming from the other end of the hallway. Guess who's your new neighbor? Indrik said with a cocky smile as he walked past them. He suddenly stopped and slightly turned his head to the side. I hope you're ready. This time no restraints or disturbances, Indrik voiced out before he kept moving. Get your head out of your ass, kid. Why are you speaking to your big bro like that? E voiced out with an annoyed look. Huh, who's this black bozo? Was I speaking to you? Indrik retorted while turning around to stare at E with a provocative expression. Yo, looks like this kid ain't got no. Before E could complete his retort, Gustav interrupted. Eat, don't bother. I'll handle it myself, Gustav said as he turned around and walked towards Indrik. Looks like you didn't learn nothing, kid, Gustav said while staring into Indrik's eyes intensely. Pa. Gustav suddenly placed his hand on Indrik's right shoulder. It looked normal, but it was actually a hard slap that nearly popped Indrik's shoulder out of its socket, causing him to tremble slightly. All right then, the next time will be the last time, Gustav said before taking his hand off Indrik's shoulder and turning around. We shall see about that, Indrik said with gritted teeth before turning around. Why the hell is he acting like that? E asked with a disappointed look. Long story. Also don't call him my brother anymore, Gustav said before walking forward. E was confused with the way things were and started asking, but Gustav didn't say anything because he was actually speaking with the system in his mind. Did you sense that? Gustav asked. I did. Something's up with him. This encounter is not nearly enough to figure things out. I'll scan him more when you make contact with him next time, the system responded. Why are y'all following me? Gustav asked as he arrived in front of his room door and turned around to stare at Eldris, and Falco. I'm hungry, E said with a famished look while rubbing his belly. Me too, Eldris and Falco voiced out one after the other. Well, go cook something in your damn apartments for goodness sake, Gustav said while pushing his door open. Before he could close his door, all three of them dashed in. Swoosh, 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 bang. It turned out he had just banged the door for nothing. Gustav turned around to stare at the three of them in his living room. Falco's alter ego had taken over at this moment. "Go prepare something nice for me in the kitchen, you lowly weakling," he voiced out. "You four are hopeless," Gustav said while shaking his head. Within a small dark room, a spherical projection displaying the image of a person floated in the middle, making the darkroom a little less dim. "According to your report, they both lasted more than 3 hours," the person in the image asked. "Yes, sire. This is the first time any cadet had managed to break the 3 hours record the young miss set years back. And this time it's 2 of them." Within the dark enclosed room, the silhouette standing in front of the projection responded. "Amazing. These 2, you have to keep your eyes on them. Especially the boy. Not only is he connected to her, but according to Mag, he's also trying to hide the full extent of his capabilities." The person in the projection spoke once again with a mysterious but intrigued and slightly excited tone. "Yes, I will make sure to keep observing him. The green asset has also been doing her own fair share of the observation work. She has given me a lot of exclusive info about him," the silhouette responded. "Good, good. She will do well to continue her task, or she will be stripped of her status," the person in the projection said with a condescending tone. "Now don't forget to send me the medical results after they have undergone the bloodline strengthening session," the person within the projection added before disappearing. "Yes, sire." The silhouette bowed slightly as he spoke before turning around to leave the darkroom. Chapter 417. "Yes, sire." The silhouette bowed slightly as he spoke before turning around to leave the darkroom. Just like that, a few days went by. The hype and constant discussions about the cadet challenge battles were not dying down anytime soon. It remained a widely discussed event all over the MBO camp. It was even discussed amongst the seniors who were in attendance. Even though the second years were stronger and could perform better presently, they were still astonished by the strength of the first years. They could recall that they weren't as powerful back then. During these past few days, the cadets had continued their morning routine with their bloodlines sealed. They had thought the morning routine would change or stop, but they had thought wrong. Officer Brian explained to them that if they wanted improvement on the expansion of their bloodline channel points, it was necessary to maintain the routine for at least a year or more. The special class cadets had been informed that they would be undergoing bloodline strengthening by Friday, which was only 2 days away. On this particular day, the weather was very cold. The first years had woken up for their morning routine, but then the rain started to pour. Tra, 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 tra. Crystalline-looking droplets of waters fell from the sky, repeatedly showering the residential areas, roads, and practically every area of the MBO camp, causing the fog to spread across the place. It was still some minutes past 5 a.m., so obviously, the skies were dark. However, the coldness of the environment, along with the slightly heavy rain, had the cadets wondering if the morning routine was still gonna hold. To their disappointment, the alarm still rang out by 30 minutes past 5 a.m. They rushed towards the starting point the instant they heard it underneath the pouring rain. Gustav and the others made use of EES vortexes to arrive there promptly. A massive circular structure with flat surfaces was floating above the starting point. Officer Bryant, along with his 2 assistant instructors, were waiting for their arrival. A lot of cadets were there already waiting. The rain was unable to touch them underneath this massive circular structure. For unknown reasons, even the winds couldn't infiltrate this vicinity. Regardless of the cold, the cadets were unaffected since they were all-powerful, but they couldn't imagine how bad it was gonna be when their bloodlines got sealed. "Well, you guys didn't think the drill wasn't gonna continue, did you?" Officer Bryant voiced out with a burst of light laughter. Some of the cadets' faces paled slightly after hearing that. "The weather is gonna make it even more fun. Let's see how long y'all are gonna take," he said before dashing forward. Pa, 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 pa. Slaps rang out as Officer Bryant went about the place, putting seals on the cadets once again. The instant they lost their bloodlines, everyone felt the cold seep into their bodies due to the weather. Damn, I didn't know it was gonna be this bad. Oh my. We're supposed to scale through those landscapes in this state. This is impossible. The voices of the cadets complaining in the background could be heard. Haha, now I'll be here waiting. Good luck to y'all, Officer Bryant said with a loud and dismissive tone. The timer began again, counting down from 3 hours. Even though most of the cadets were reluctant, they had no choice but to obey. Ta, 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 ta. The sounds of footsteps stomping all over the wet and muddy grounds reverberated across the place as the cadets ran towards the direction of the forest. The wind blew fiercely from time to time, making some cadets shiver subconsciously as they ran. In a few seconds, some of them had been soaked by the rain from head to toe. They were struggling to see up ahead due to the reduced visuality from the excess fog covering the environment. Gustav dashed across the forest of dense trees along with everyone else. This wasn't a race of speed now. To him, it was more of a race of endurance. Gustav made sure to observe his surroundings with utmost caution as he darted across the forest. Occasionally, cadets would collide with trees since they couldn't see the environment properly. Also, a lot of cadets were falling into traps due to the distorted view of the environment. Swoof! Gustav quickly squatted as he noticed something in the distance. A body came flying through the air, passing over him before slamming into the trunk of a tree. Gustav moved a few feet towards the side as he continued to run forward. More and more cadets gained injuries as they fell to different kinds of traps that they would have been able to avoid on a normal day. Gustav, at this point, had his hair falling as it stuck to his face and ran down his neck due to being wet. His uniform stuck to his body, and water kept running down his face. Misty-colored air oozed out of his nose as he ran forward. A few minutes later, he arrived in front of the mountain area and started to climb along with many others. There was not much gap between cadets in front this time. However, there were still hundreds of cadets behind in the forest area trying to find their way here. Most of them were even going in the wrong direction without realizing. In about 20 minutes more, cadets that had climbed started to experience difficulties in holding onto the pieces of rocks piercing out of the rocky mountain. The rain had made them slippery, and now that their grip strength had reduced, they could barely hold on tightly to it. It's just a matter of time before Gustav could complete his thought process, a scream was heard below. Someone's fingers slipped when they grabbed onto a piece of rock above them to climb higher. Luckily for them, it was only about 20 feet above ground level. Gustav shook his head as he continued climbing upwards after a short break. He predicted that only about half of the cadets would be able to scale this mountain today. Chapter 418. Gustav focused on climbing and observed his environment carefully. His body had improved since he started this daily routine for the last month. Even with all bloodlines and stats sealed, his regular body was stronger than normal, so he had been finishing the morning routine in about 2 hours like the rest of the special class cadets. However, this time he couldn't tell if he would be able to get there in 3 hours. He scaled over 300 feet in about 30 more minutes and had finally reached halfway across the mountain. The rain was still pouring crazily, and one of the cadets almost got struck by a lightning bolt a few minutes earlier. However, even though the lightning bolt missed the cadet by a few centimeters, the sloppy area it slammed into crumbled into fragments and affected an area of around 30 feet, causing rocks to roll down. The cadet fell along with the rocks that pulled out of the mountain and slammed into several cadets climbing downwards. Some cadets also got slammed by the rolling rocks and instantly passed out due to the heavy force. Fortunately, the flying mechanical drones with arms saved those who were spiraling downwards due to the rocks that slammed into them. They were swooped away from underneath the rocks before they fell to the ground and got crushed by some bigger ones. At this point, many more cadets had fallen to traps, and others had slipped while climbing due to the weather. Gustav looked up once again before he resumed climbing. Only about 50 feet higher was the limit of his visuality. Beyond that, he couldn't see anything else, and even before that, the visuality of the environment wasn't so sharp. He could only see one person towards his northwest at this point, also climbing up. This person was also a special class, and just like Gustav, he was resting. Gustav continued to climb and moved to the side whenever he observed any weird area. Gustav grabbed onto another piece of pointed rock as he arrived at the 700 feet mark. Only about 15 special class cadets had managed to make it this far. Gustav pulled himself up again, and suddenly the rocky part pulled out. Gustav was surprised as the rock pulled out, but he was lucky to still have his other hand on a firm part of the mountain. He dipped his hand into the hole formed from the rock that slipped out and pulled himself up. Gustav felt a little touch of a breeze on his fingertips as his hand dipped into the hole. He pulled his arm back and raised his head to stare at the hole, which was the same size as the rock that got pulled out. It was pretty dark as it should be, but Gustav could see a little fingernail-sized opening at the bottom of the hole. Gustav put his hand back in the hole and waited for a few seconds. He felt the small touch of breeze again. Should I? Gustav thought of something then discarded it. He pulled himself upwards once again and pulled out his hand to place it on another piece of rock before placing his right kneecap in the hole. As he lifted himself up again, grrhhkkkkk, jjrrkkyyyhh, crun. More rocks pulled out of that particular mountainside and started rolling down. Gustav quickly pushed himself upwards more so as not to be affected. He leaned his back against the slightly sloppy mountain and turned to look down. The rocks kept rolling down, and in a few seconds, he could hear the sounds of screams underneath after they disappeared into the fog below. Oh, looks like some unlucky ones are following my trail. Gustav shook his head in pity. In a few more seconds, the rocks had stopped pulling out. Gustav's eyes squinted as he stared at the door-sized hole that had been created within the mountain after those rocks pulled out. What's up with that? Gustav wondered as he gently descended to the position of the hole. Gustav's eyes widened as he spotted an entrance to the interior of the mountain. It was really a dark and deep hole, but Gustav could see a small orange in the distance even though it was barely glowing. Gustav felt he should continue climbing, but he was also curious to see where this passageway would lead to. He slowly moved into the hole and squatted a little as he started moving forward. There was no one in the vicinity, so no one had witnessed this incident, and it was mostly due to low visuality. As Gustav moved forward, he noticed that the orange glow was getting brighter and brighter. After a few more 20 steps, he arrived in front of a square-shaped opening where the orange glow seemed to be shining through. Gustav moved closer and looked through the hole. What in the world? Why are there stairs? Gustav wondered with a low tone as he noticed the stairs on the other side. The square-shaped opening was too small for him to fit through, so Gustav stepped back 9 paces. Swai! He suddenly charged forward and pushed forth his right leg. Bam! His foot slammed heavily into a side of the wall close to the opening. A part of the wall broke apart and fell in, but it still wasn't wide enough. Gustav had to step back and charge forth several times while kicking the wall for it to get wide enough. Brrrhhh. Some more parts of the wall fell in after the 10th charge, and Gustav finally had enough space to fit in. He slightly lowered his body and pushed himself into the hole. Upon arriving on the other side, Gustav found himself on a 50 feet wide stairway that went as high as the eyes could see. On the walls ahead and below, small orange-colored crystals could be seen protruding out of different areas. Each of these crystals had a small light glow that brightened up the dark stairway. Gustav now understood where the orange glow was coming from. What is this? Gustav wondered as he looked around. Could it be that this stairway leads to the top of the mountain? Chapter 419. Could it be that this stairway leads to the top of the mountain? Gustav wondered as he kept observing his surroundings. The stairway was erected in a curved format as it extended upwards. If Gustav had his bloodlines and stats unsealed at the moment, he would have tried dashing down and up across the stairs just to check it out. However, at the moment, he decided to listen to his instincts and started climbing upwards. Since this was a stairway, it was way easier than having to pull himself up, making use of his fingers and the muscles in his arms and legs. Gustav had no trouble with visibility as he climbed upwards. Those orange crystals were also embedded into the ceiling area of the stairway. Why would such a place even exist? Gustav wondered as he kept climbing up. In the next 15 minutes, Gustav had climbed up to 300 steps without taking a pause. Since there was no fog within this place, he could already see where the stairway led hundreds of feet away. He was closing in on the top of the stairs, and he could see that there were no openings of sorts that led to outside the place. Even after squinting his eyes and looking around several times from his current position, he still couldn't see anything like that. Gustav decided to get to the end of the stairway to get a closer look before jumping to conclusions. After about 3 minutes, he finally arrived at the end of the stairs, where a slightly wide podium could be seen. He climbed to the top of the rectangular-looking podium where the rooftop was only 9 feet away. There were even more orange glowing crystals embedded into more parts of the wall over here, but Gustav hadn't tried taking any of them for 2 reasons. The first is that he couldn't sense any FBRM of energy from them due to having his powers sealed. Second was the fact that he didn't know if he would trigger something by pulling any of them out of the walls. He had decided that after the morning routine, he would come back here to properly investigate. Gustav looked around him, trying to find an opening, even touching some parts of the wall. Still, he couldn't find anything even after checking for 5 minutes. On the outside, the cadets were still climbing the mountain, and no one had managed to reach the peak yet. The closest to reaching the peak was still about 150 to 200 feet away. The more time Gustav spent looking for a way out, the others slowly caught up even though he was currently ahead of them. On the bright side, he didn't have to suffer the harsh weather like they did, but if he didn't find a way out, all this would have been for nothing. Gustav, remembering that he was probably way ahead of everyone at the moment, decided to sit down in the meantime and wait for a while. He didn't want to arouse any suspicions when he finally came out, so he decided he was going to hold on for the next 20 minutes, which was the timing he was sure that Elevera would be close to the peak. On the outside of the stairway area, lots of cadets that were climbing on the same trail as Gustav earlier had changed directions, especially after seeing those who were hit by the falling rocks. Those who were fortunate shifted towards the side and climbed on the far ends of that path. The side of the rocky mountain that everyone was climbing was thousands of feet wide, so the cadets could spread themselves out as much as they wanted to. Due to this development, those who had gone higher than the point Gustav found the hidden passageway didn't notice the hole. The fog reducing everyone's visuals made it even more impossible for them to notice the dark hole after distancing themselves from that trail. Just as Gustav had predicted, many of the cadets had become incapacitated and unable to continue this morning routine after close to half of them fell while climbing the mountain and sustained heavy injuries. Most special class were only a few hundred feet from reaching the top at this moment. Everyone was soaking wet with both raindrops and their sweats which had mixed together. After 20 minutes more had gone by, Gustav finally stood up. He literally had a timer in his brain. Even though his stats were locked, his normal intelligence was still quite high, so knowing how much time had gone by was easy for him if he truly wanted to pay attention to that. Gustav had been looking around for 20 minutes. Although he couldn't find any passageway, still, he already noticed something off. The same orange crystals he decided not to touch had grabbed his attention now. Every one of them had a certain proportion to them, and all glowed. He had studied the brightness of their glow based on each of their sizes and noticed that one was off. Every smaller-sized orange crystal glowed brighter than the bigger-sized ones except for a particular one. This one close to the ground on the east side was smaller but dimmer than the others of the same size. The crystals were always in a kind of group protruding from the wall. He had never seen any group lumped together that was below 6 in number, but this particular one only had 3. Gustav moved over, hoping his intuition was right, and grabbed hold of it after squatting. He waited for a reaction of some kind, but nothing happened. Gustav gently shook one of the crystal like he was trying to pull it out from the wall when it suddenly descended down like a lever. KRRYCHHCH. The place vibrated intensely, causing Gustav to nearly lose his balance. TSSSHHHH. The ceiling area above suddenly separated like a door. Bibim. A massive opening that led to the top of the mountain appeared above Gustav. Chapter 420. The raindrops started to fall in after the opening was revealed, causing Gustav to shut one eye as it dropped onto his face. Here goes nothing, Gustav said internally as he jumped up and grabbed onto the ledge before pulling himself upwards. As he arrived at the top of the mountain, the opening closed up, causing the vicinity to vibrate a little. Gustav's body that was initially almost dry after being within the mountain for nearly an hour became wet again. The dark clouds greeted him with silver-colored roots-like lines running through them from time to time. Pita, 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 pita. The raindrops drummed mercilessly on the surface of the mountain top, causing some slightly caved-in places to be filled with murky water. Gustav only stood there for a few seconds before he heard the sound of footsteps towards the far east side of the vicinity. He turned to the side, and the person also did the same. Even though they were around 50 feet away from themselves, they instantly recognized each other. Elevira, Gustav, both muttered lightly under their breath. Just as I calculated. Others shouldn't be too far off right now, Gustav said internally. Did he get here before me? Elevira wondered. She had no idea since the visibility of the environment was bad. She couldn't know if anyone was close to her or not. She was still a bit surprised that he would get here this fast, though. She wanted to rest a little after arriving, but seeing Gustav here, her passion was ignited once again. She breathed in and out profusely, causing her massive busts to raise and occasionally lower with her uniform sticking to her body. Both of them stared at each other for a few seconds before Elevira started moving forward once again. Elevira had expected Gustav to also start moving just as she did, but he was still standing there staring in her direction. Why is he not moving? She wondered. To her surprise, Gustav moved to the side and sat on a slightly large rock that protruded from the ground. What is this? Is he resting? She asked herself as she paused in front. Gustav noticed her hesitation as she turned to stare at him from a distance. "I'm giving you an head start, go," Gustav voiced out with a smile. Elevira's forehead creased slightly as she heard that. "Not needed," she said while returning the smile and moved towards the side to also sit down on a piece of large rock. "Huh," Gustav exclaimed with a light tone. "You really should take the head start, though. I can overtake you at any time," Gustav voiced out again. Although they were around 50 feet away from each other, his voice echoed across the place, so she was able to hear him clearly. "Oh, there's no need. I'm ready whenever you are," Elevira responded. "She's quite hard-headed. I have no ounce of tiredness in me right now, so I'll practically be cheating if I competed with her right now." This was Gustav's thought process. He knew that even though Elevira was very strong, there was no way she wasn't fatigued from climbing the mountain, which was why he decided to wait for her to go further before following along. They were both interested in seeing who would be first to get to the finish line due to this unique circumstance, but Gustav felt it wouldn't be fair. This was how they sat for the next 5 minutes without exchanging more words or making a move. Elevira didn't budge the whole time as she kept her sight on Gustav's position. Gustav also didn't stand up in the meantime, giving her the opportunity to rest unbeknownst to her. Another 3 minutes passed, and finally, another person arrived on the mountain top. "Oh, Gustav, you're already here?" Even Eldris was quite surprised because Gustav didn't pick up the pace during morning routines until they were on the last course. "Don't worry about me, just keep going," Gustav replied with a dismissive expression. Eldris nodded slightly and kept moving forward. Gustav could tell that Chad and E had probably arrived at the top too. They just probably arrived on the far end where he couldn't see because of the reduced visuality. Gustav still decided to wait for about 5 minutes more. About 3 more special classes passed the middle of Elevira and Gustav's position with confused looks as they noticed them both. They went on their way since they didn't know what was going on. "She's really hard-headed. She doesn't seem to care about the others passing her," Gustav said internally before standing to his feet. The instant he stood up, so did Elevira. Tra, 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 tra. Their footsteps reverberated across the place as they started running towards the edge. Gustav adopted a moderate speed, moving neither too fast nor slow so as to avoid slipping and falling. He slowly began to pick up the pace as they moved further ahead to a less slippery area. He and Elevira slowly began to overtake some of the cadets that had surpassed them earlier and arrived at the edge in a few more minutes. The ropes tied to the small poles sticking out of the ground could be seen leading straight into the fog up ahead. This particular area was always foggy, but this time it was way worse. It was as if the rain had decided not to stop pouring today. It was currently 7 a.m., but it still looked like it was midnight. Gustav and Elevira quickly picked the ropes that they saw stable and started walking on them. They didn't go for the dangling ones because they could tell that someone was already walking on those. Gustav started walking steadily across the line with his arms slightly spread apart. Alevra, on the other hand, was walking almost twice as fast as he was. Although Gustav had improved his balancing, Alevra was just on another level when it came to things like this. In a few minutes, Gustav had crossed 50 feet on the line, and from the position of the mountain peak, he had disappeared into the fog. However, the rope was still dangling slightly due to his movement. Tra! Tra! Another cadet arrived at the peak and instantly moved towards the position of the rope Gustav was walking on. A smile appeared on his face as he squatted and brought out a small laser knife while reaching out for the rope. Tra! Another cadet arrived at the peak and instantly moved towards the position of the rope Gustav was walking on. A smile appeared on his face as he squatted and brought out a small laser knife while reaching out for the rope. Tra! Another cadet arrived at the peak and instantly moved towards the position of the rope Gustav was walking on. A smile appeared on his face as he squatted and brought out a small laser knife while reaching out for the rope. Chapter 422. Beneath was the small 5,000 feet wide river. Gustav jumped in instantly and started swimming forward. At this point, Alevra had also arrived at the top of the mountain. She noticed earlier on that the rope Gustav was walking on suddenly disappeared. She moved over to the connecting points and squatted. "The rope cut?" she mumbled with a surprised expression while pulling it up a little. She looked down and could see the rope dangling in the distance. "So much for getting my hopes up. He probably fell already," she sighed while standing to her feet. "No one's ever gonna be on my level of strength," she said internally with a look of disappointment before running forward. After another 20 minutes, Gustav had gone past the middle of the river. He couldn't swim too fast due to the current of the river shifting towards the side. Twice, the usual energy was being expended due to this. Gustav felt his arms being sore at the moment due to repeatedly swinging. Other special class cadets were thousands of feet behind at this point, with Alevra being an exception. Although she was still feeling disappointed, Alevra swam forward at full speed, not minding her surroundings. Other normal cadets were just arriving at the mountain top behind them. At this moment, half of the cadets had dropped out of the morning routine since they couldn't make it this far. In another 15 minutes, Gustav finally arrived at the shore of the river. He was shivering intensely at this point. His knees vibrated, and he repeatedly sneezed as water dribbled down his clothes. Gustav breathed in and out as he started moving forward again. His speed at this point had reduced drastically as he jogged down the path that led to the starting point of the morning routine. In a few more minutes, Alevra also arrived and started running down the same path without stopping for a single second to rest. She noticed the outline of footsteps on the muddy path. "Did someone get here before I did?" she wondered out loud. "Impossible," she said before running forward at full speed. Alevra was like a beast. Even with the harsh conditions of the weather and the fact that she had just come out of the river that was also freezing cold, her body was hardly affected as she ran forward. In a few minutes, she could see the outline of a familiar figure in the distance. However, it was too far, so she had no idea who the person was. "So someone was ahead of me." Alevra had a surprised expression on her face as she voiced out. She kept running forward at full speed, and she knew that from the looks of things, she would eventually catch up to the person up ahead since they were slower than she was. The only problem was they were now close to the starting point. Gustav, who was up ahead, could already hear the sound of footsteps behind him slapping onto the muddy ground. Since he was no longer in the water, he was starting to warm up a bit, so his speed increased as he ran more. He could already see the starting point in the distance, which was the playing field where Officer Bryant and his assistants were seated waiting. In the next 1 minute, he would arrive underneath the massive circular platform covering the entire place from above. Alevra increased her pace again and began to catch up. In the next 30 seconds, she was only a few 10 feet behind. "That's Gustav?" She was finally able to see his figure properly. Gustav turned his head slightly to the side and stared at her figure. "You've lost this one," he said with a smile before increasing his speed. A few minutes later, Gustav laid on the ground underneath the massive platform, breathing in and out. His body was being dried by a weird machine floating above him. Elevra sat few feet away with a fatigued expression on her face. "You still didn't win," she said. "No need to remind me. I was there, you know," Gustav responded even though he was still out of breath. It turned out that he and Elevra tied. After his provocation, she accelerated and still managed to get underneath the platform at the same time as he did. There were many cadets underneath this place at the moment. These were injured cadets that were unable to continue after one incident or the other. There were more than 200 of them here at the moment. "How did you even manage to get ahead of me?" Elevra asked with a confused expression. "How did you manage to tie with me?" Gustav threw a question back at her. Both of them stared at each other for a few seconds. "She's a monster, all right," Gustav said internally. "What is he hiding?" Elevra wondered. "Yes, you two managed to get here after 3 hours and 30 minutes. Officer Bryant voiced out as he approached them. "Honestly, I expected everyone to spend at least 4 or 5 hours out there." Officer Bryant nodded in satisfaction as he spoke. "Oh, and this is an orchestrated test session with a technological-induced weather," Officer Bryant revealed. "What?" Gustav and Elevra voiced out at the same time. "So this was planned?" Gustav asked. "Yes," Officer Bryant replied while laughing lightly. "The weather within the MBO camp is different from the outside world. It can be manipulated as the commander deems fit," he added. Minutes later, more cadets began to arrive. Eldris, EE, and Indrik had arrived before everyone else. Indrik gave Gustav a weird glare before finding somewhere to settle down. After an hour had gone by, those who had managed to make it to the top of the mountain arrived. Less than half of the total number of cadets that embarked on the challenge made it to the end. Officer Bryant came forward again and started addressing the cadets. He explained to them that this was actually a test and technology-induced, just like he told Elevra and Gustav earlier. Chapter 423. He explained to them that this was actually a test and technology-induced, just like he told Elevra and Gustav earlier. The cadets were in disbelief as they heard that. According to the commander, an extra 5,000 points are going to be credited to the first who arrived, which is Gustav and Elevra, while the rest of you who finished will receive 3,000 points each. Officer Bryant suddenly stated the rewards. The cadets had shimmering eyes as they heard that. Chatter, chatter, chatter. They hadn't expected this at all. After Officer Bryant voiced out the rewards, the rain began to decrease. In a few seconds, it stopped completely, and the skies began to brighten slowly. Everyone realized that this was the first time they were actually seeing rainfall when they had a morning routine. They had been here for over a month, and it had never happened once. So, the weather here is being manipulated? They remembered how the weather conditions had been favorable all through and realized that it was too good to be true. It turns out they were being tested today for how they were going to handle extreme and unexpected situations. Those of you who failed will be going 2 laps for tomorrow's morning routine as punishment, Officer Bryant announced. Those who failed had looks of dissatisfaction on their faces as they voiced out their complaints. However, their complaints fell on deaf ears. On the bright side, the weather tomorrow would be clear, so it still wouldn't be as dangerous as today's morning routine was. At this point, the skies had cleared completely, and the sun could be seen in the eastern side of the skies, shining its rays all across the place. It was as if it never rained when looking at the skies, but the ground still had wetness. Now, Officer Bryant's face suddenly turned serious as he voiced out, causing everyone to focus their attention on him. "We have received an offensive report," he said while walking forward and stood right in front of Gustav. Could this have something to do with the stairs I found within the mountain?" Gustav wondered internally, while looking up at Officer Bryant with a calm expression. He thought that somebody may have found out about his whole escapade and questioned internally if that was seen as cheating. Gustav Crimson's rope was sabotaged by another cadet while he was on it, Officer Bryant revealed. Gasp. Chatter. Chatter. Dash. Turns out he was on that rope that suddenly cut. Dash, a sabotage? But I was there. I didn't see anything. Dash. So someone actually caused that to happen? How did he manage to make it to the other side then? The cadets were surprised and confused at this sudden revelation. They stared at Gustav with an expression of disbelief, still wondering how he managed to make it to the other side even after the line was cut. As you all know, we keep an eye on you lots from over here with our hidden cams. However, the bad weather was also a double-edged sword to today's test since we couldn't also see as well from over here, Officer Brian explained. However, we have made use of the advanced footage to uncover the culprit. I will give you one chance to reveal yourself and help in lightening your punishment, Officer Bryant voiced out and began to count down from 5. 5, 4, 3. Everyone kept looking around as he counted down to see who would stand to their feet. 1. Just as Officer Bryant was about to say 0, a cadet stood to his feet. It was me, he voiced out. Gasp, Orlando? Some of them recognized this cadet to be among the top 100 cadets on the ranking. He was about 62 in height with a brown buzz cut and a cross tattoo on his forehead. He moved towards the front and stood beside Gustav and opposite Officer Bryant. Why did you do that? Officer Bryant voiced out. Orlando stood in the spot, speechless. Pa. Officer Bryant snapped his fingers, causing a holographic projection to appear above in which footage was being displayed. This showed how Orlando moved towards the rope, squatted, and brought out a laser knife to strike the rope repeatedly. Why did you do it? Officer Bryant asked him again. I. His eyes slightly roamed about the place as he tried to say something. I hate Gustav Crimson, he voiced out. So, you're telling me that you dislike him so much that you plotted against and decided to cut a rope which several cadets could have been walking on at that time, Officer Bryant said with a look of displeasure. I knew he was the only one on the rope, Orlando responded after stammering a little. How? What were your real intentions? Officer Bryant questioned. Silence. There was no answer for several seconds. Officer Bryant suddenly reached out and locked Orlando 2 hands in a military-like grip before spinning him and putting his right leg in front. Fly. Bam. Orlando was pinned to the ground in an instant with his face kissing the ground. First off, apologize to him, Officer Bryant commanded. Gustav stared at Orlando, who was practically being forced to bow before him. Orlando slowly voiced out words of apology before being dragged away by one of Officer Bryant's assistants. Gustav just casually shrugged at the situation. For all he knew, that made him even faster than he would have been if he walked all the way there. Officer Bryant began to list out Orlando's punishment, which caused some of the cadets to shiver in fear. Besides having to do 3 laps of the morning routine for the next 1 month, he was also assigned to feed some mixed breeds from the Year 2 dungeon area for the next 1 month. Apparently, this dungeon area had some of the most dangerous mixed breeds in the world kept there, and it was off-limits to Year 1 because they were seen as not powerful enough. Chapter 424. Officer Bryant went on to praise Gustav and Elevra's performance as he displayed some of their footage, especially where Gustav was swinging, making use of the rope. This made the cadets realize even more that Gustav wasn't one to be trifled with, since he could practically turn every disadvantageous situation around. Gustav was surprised that there was no footage displayed of when he found the entrance into the mountain, which made him wonder if that was known or not. Indrik stared at Gustav's position from behind before staring at Orlando being taken away. That buffoon. He could never do anything right, Indrik said internally with a disappointed expression. Well, it doesn't matter. Time for the next step, Indrik said internally as he turned to stare at a particular position where a girl with silver and pink-colored hair sat. She had 2 small horns on her forehead and a very beautiful look. From this angle, it could be seen that she was staring in Gustav's direction. Hee, let's see how you'll react after I have dealt with her, he said with a sadistic expression displayed. Officer Bryant went on to dismiss the cadets afterwards after unsealing their bloodlines. One couldn't imagine how anyone would even dare to misbehave within the MBO when they had someone like Officer Bryant who could seal bloodlines. Most of them wondered if there were any boundaries to it, and if he could seal any mixed blood's bloodline regardless of how powerful they were. Gustav, after having all his bloodlines unsealed, went through his schedule for the day again. He was supposed to go for the training session of Bloodline's powerful attack creation in the afternoon and meet Vera for personal training together in the evening, so he figured he still had time. Gustav excused himself from the guys and sneakily moved towards the forest area in front. Sprint has been activated. He dashed through the forest quite easily now that his abilities were back. Sensing traps from hundreds of feet away was not an issue for him when he used God Eyes. Gustav arrived before the mountain in seconds and squatted slightly. The amount of force his feet created as he descended caused the ground to vibrate a little. The instant he pushed himself upwards, thump, his body shot straight through the air with speed as he scaled over 500 feet high in almost an instant. Gustav landed on the slightly sloppy side of the mountain and kept running upwards. Rocky parts of the mountain rolled down due to the impact when he landed on it. He recalled where the location of the opening was and made a diagonal line across the side of the mountain as he ran. In a few more seconds, he could see the opening about 100 feet higher towards his right. The mountain seemed to be slightly shaken upwards from his running. A 20 feet tall rock fragment pulled out of the mountain, suddenly headed for Gustav. It was only a few feet away from him. Chop has been activated. A milky glow suddenly surrounded Gustav's right palm as he swung it forward with force. Swee-eye. Gustav's right arm went through the rock in an arc format. The massive rock fragment was instantly cleaved in two, missing Gustav's figure as they parted ways for him to keep running forward. Gustav jumped up slightly and descended straight into the hole that led to the inside of the mountain. Can you sense that? The instant Gustav got in, he asked the system. Yes. I can sense the energy it emits. The system responded as Gustav walked forward. Gustav arrived in front of the opening he created and moved towards the stairway. I know what you're thinking. However, I can't absorb this type of energy. The system added. No, not you. Me, Gustav said as he moved upwards on the stairs. Now that his abilities were back, he could sense the energy coming from the orange crystals properly. If I mix this with the energy container, it will become even more destructive. Gustav could sense how chaotic it would turn because his bloodline was already reacting to them. The only problem now is, I have no idea if anyone would notice when the crystals go missing, so I can only take a little, Gustav said as he moved closer to one of them. He activated God Eyes and observed the surroundings of the orange crystal on the wall. Gustav already had so many hidden and powerful attacks that would blast enemies away easily, but no one knew about this. He still wanted to have more so that when the time came where he had to battle against forces that were way more powerful than he would have alternatives. Gustav took 3 pieces of the orange crystals after he didn't notice anything out of the ordinary within the wall. Gustav decided to check the place out properly after keeping the 3 pieces of crystals within his storage device. He already knew where the stairs upwards led to, so he dashed downwards. The stairways were constructed in a spiraling format, so Gustav was practically running down in a twirling format. In a few seconds, Gustav got to a point downwards where he could see intertwining stairways. In a few more seconds, he reached a platform downwards where all the stairs began. There were about 4 different stairways connecting to this platform that led to 4 different directions. After reaching a certain height, one would be unable to see the rest of the stairways not only because of the massive inner structure of the place, but also because of the walls built on the sides of every stairway, which blocked his vision. Gustav looked around him and figured the whole place was still rocky, looking with more orange crystals protruding from the walls. There was only one pathway that led further down in front of the platform. It was obvious that this particular pathway was the way forward. Gustav started walking on this pathway, which he could see leading to a dark tunnelway up ahead. Chapter 425. Gustav started walking on this pathway, which he could see leading to a dark tunnelway up ahead. Gustav walked through it and kept on walking for a few seconds before he arrived at the end of the tunnelway, where there was a massive outline of a door. However, the metallic door-shaped structure constructed on the wall gave Gustav a kind of sense of crisis, so he stopped several 10 feet away to observe it properly. God Eyes had improved so much at this point that Gustav could practically see through anything as thick as 15 inches. However, even after activating God Eyes to stare at this massive metallic door, Gustav couldn't see a thing. Other objects or structures in the vicinity still had some kind of colors, but this particular metallic door didn't have anything like that. It was just dark through and through, almost like it wasn't made of any material that existed on Earth, which made Gustav feel a little strange. Gustav decided that his investigation had come to an end at this point and decided to head back before he would trigger anything or arouse any suspicions. He dashed back towards the platform that led to the 4 different stairways. Gustav identified the stairway he was coming from and climbed a few stairs up, but then he thought of something. Where do the other 3 lead? He wondered as he stared at the 3 other stairways. Gustav dashed towards the stairway on the left first as this thought came to his mind and started climbing upwards. Silent advancement has been activated. He decided to activate silent advancement, which caused his footsteps to become practically silent as he bolted upwards. After about a minute of climbing, he arrived at the end of this particular stairway, which happened to be similar to the top of the one he was coming from. Just like that one, there was a dead end, and the ceiling area was only a few feet away, with many of the glowing orange crystals embedded in the walls around. Gustav already knew what this meant and dashed downwards again. Arriving back at the platform, he climbed another stairway upwards, which led to the same similar scenario. Minutes later, Gustav was on his way out of the mountain through where he had come from. Turns out all these stairways lead to different parts of the mountain. Gustav didn't know if the information he had gathered here was useful or not, but at least he was glad he had cleared his doubts. If he didn't do this, he would still be curious. Although now sating his curiosity had brought about a new one, which had him wondering what the purpose of all that was. Finding out the answers for this one was a risk Gustav wasn't willing to take. He just decided to be careful and sealed the wall he broke through the other time when entering in the morning. There's no point to the morning routine if I cheat. Well, this morning was kinda needed. Gustav chuckled lightly as he moved out of the hole. Half-collapsal form activation. Gustav's entire body turned greenish as furs came out of his skin, and he grew an extra pair of legs and arms. This transformation was from the alien creature's form he took during the final test phase. He hardly made use of it because he was bothered about people recognizing the look of an alien, but now that he could take half the form of any creature he had the power to transform into, Gustav could hide the true look of that creature. Gustav spread all 4 arms and slapped 4 positions surrounding the large hole created on the body of the mountain. Sheen, sheen, sheen. Diamond-like looking walls appeared within the holes and covered the opening all through. After that was done, Gustav leapt down from the mountain. Bang! He landed on the ground, causing dust to scatter across the place. After straightening his body, he moved towards a fragment of rock on the side and lifted it up. Thump! He leapt upwards again, soaring across the air before landing back at the spot he was standing on earlier. Gustav placed the rock fragment down in front of the initial opening, blocking the view. After all was said and done, he decided to finally leave the area. Few minutes later, Gustav was back in his apartment channeling his bloodline. Due to the weather issues today, they had spent a longer time finishing the morning routine. So at the moment, it was almost 11 in the morning. Gustav still had about 3 hours of free time before the next training session, so he decided to channel his bloodlines in the meantime. 2 hours into it, Gustav decided to take a pause and check on a certain part within. His senses dwelled on a pinkish flame that happened to be swaying like it was alive. It is bigger now. Gustav noticed his Yarki had increased in size. But I still haven't had the chance to try it out since I arrived here. Gustav was a bit disturbed about this. He didn't want to try it during a battle or on one of the cadets just like that. He was a bit skeptical about even revealing it because he felt that the MBO instructors would recognize it. His plan was to train it by repeatedly trying it out on mixed breeds like he used to do within the border. The problem was, even though the MBO camp had a location where they could train with live mixed breeds, it was off-limits to Year 1 cadet mixed bloods. Only the seniors had the authorization to visit there for training. There were a few more places that were off-limits also. How far can it cover now? Gustav wondered before deciding to activate it. Shroom. A pinkish glow suddenly spread out from his figure, covering the entire environment. It spread out of his apartment and covered the entire building as a whole. However, it didn't stop there. It kept going till it covered the entire 8 buildings in the residential area. Chapter 426. Gustav quickly retracted his Yarki as he noticed that it kept spreading outwards. Gasp! Chatter. Chatter. Dash, what was that? Dash, hey, did you see that energy that covered the entire dragon residence? I felt like submitting to that force just now. What the hell? Was that an officer testing out his strength? Both within and outside the vicinity of where Gustav's Yarki spread to, everyone who had witnessed it had confused expressions and thoughts as they wondered what it was. No one could pinpoint exactly where it had come from, but some of them knew it had to be from one of the buildings within the dragon residence, while others felt it might have been an MBO officer testing something out. Well, they weren't wrong when they thought it was an MBO officer because Gustav was practically an officer already. This suddenly became a topic of debate while Gustav, the culprit, stayed within his room with a contemplative expression displayed on his face. How long would I be able to make use of it now? Even though Gustav knew his Yarki had improved, he had no idea how long he'd be able to make use of it now since he didn't try using it to control anyone. After channeling his bloodline for a few more minutes, Gustav decided to head out. He started moving in the direction of a place on the map, Witch Bar Facility. This was somewhere Officer Bryant was always situated after the morning routine. Gustav arrived at this black-colored, three-layered, tower-shaped building. He headed in instantly and asked some of the officers he saw about Officer Bryant. They directed him towards the end of the second corridor, where a door could be seen. Gustav arrived at the door and was about to knock when he heard a voice from within. "Come in, Officer Crimson." It was Officer Bryant's voice. SSHHSS. The door slid open, and Gustav walked into the office, which was filled with several shelves and a table on the left side. Gustav moved in and sat on the chair in front. Opposite him was Officer Bryant, who was seated with a holographic display of a computer in front of him. Normally, you'd have to throw an MBO salute when you arrive in the presence of a superior officer, but I won't hold that against you since you're still new, Officer Bryant voiced out with a slight smile. Oh, how am I being treated like an officer all of a sudden? Gustav asked with a slightly confused expression. During the training you practically don't hold that status, but afterwards you're an officer through and through. You hold power that other cadets don't. I'm quite surprised you haven't abused or used your authority yet, Officer Bryant stated. Oh? Well, I didn't know I had any authority, Gustav answered truthfully. Now that you do know, what are you gonna do? Officer Bryant asked while squinting his eyes with a suspicious look. Nothing. I don't even know what the authority entails, Gustav answered while shrugging. Officer Bryant chuckled as he heard that. This was the first time he was seeing someone so casual about being an MBO officer beside a particular person known as the Demon Queen. So why are you here? Officer Bryant finally decided to ask. There's something I need to ask about the galaxy's treaties involving Earth, Gustav revealed. Oh, ask away then, Officer Bryant responded. From what I read, Earth is in league with many other planets, but I also figured that there was a planet mentioned on volume, one that had the X sign besides its name, Gustav explained. Is there a reason why the planet called Abrukes is no longer in league with Earth? Gustav asked with a confounded expression. Well, there are several other planets just like that who fell out of agreement with Earth and are no longer on good terms, Officer Bryant explained with a dismissive expression like it was totally normal. There are? Gustav asked. Yes, didn't you read other volumes? You'll see more of them, Officer Bryant replied. Well, the other volumes are in libraries that Year 1 cadets are restricted from entering, Gustav explained. Oh, well that doesn't affect you. You're an officer. You're not bound by those restricting rules. You can visit anywhere within camp, Officer Bryant revealed. Gustav's eyes widened with a surprised look. How didn't I know of this before? He wondered. By your facial expression, I see no one told you, Sai. What are those guys doing? Officer Bryant said with a slightly frustrated expression. But I'm curious. No reasons were mentioned about the treaties going out of validation, Gustav said while holding his chin. This planet Abrukes is a bit more complicated than the others. The reason why the treaty was dissolved was not even revealed to we, officers, Officer Bryant explained. Oh, see, Gustav was a bit disappointed with the response, but a side of him was already expecting this. But for the other planets that had their treaties dissolved, reasons were stated in the other volumes, Officer Bryant added. Gustav nodded and decided not to add more questions on this particular subject so he wouldn't arouse any suspicions. Even though Officer Bryant was one of the nicest instructors, he didn't know whether he could trust him or any one of them yet. All right, thank you for your time, Sir Bryant, Gustav said while standing up. My pleasure. Do come next time when you need answers to anything, Officer Bryant said with a smile. H&M, Gustav nodded slightly and turned around to leave. When he got to the door, he slightly turned around to speak. Are you saying nowhere on camp is restricted for me? Gustav asked. Yes, as an officer you can visit anywhere, Officer Bryant voiced out. A smirk appeared on Gustav's face as he turned around. All right, he walked out of the office afterwards and started heading towards one of the libraries. Gustav opened the map on his pass. Library number 7, the largest, Gustav muttered as he stared at the map. No more restrictions. A smile appeared on Gustav's face again as he voiced out, and a particular thought appeared in his mind. Chapter 427. No more restrictions. A smile appeared on Gustav's face again as he voiced out, and a particular thought appeared in his mind. He got to the library after a few minutes. Just as Officer Bryant mentioned to him earlier, there were no restrictions. Normally, at the entrance of every library, their pass would be scanned to confirm if the owner was eligible to go in or not. A Year 1 cadet pass would be declined at the entrance of this library, but Gustav's was given entry instantly. The library was very massive with several layers and arranged in columns and rows of light. There weren't a lot of cadets within, but every face here was very unfamiliar because they were all seniors. Some of them stared at Gustav with looks of confusion, remembering that he was just a first year. Not everyone knew Gustav was already an officer. Hey, aren't you a first year? What are you doing here? A masculine voice was heard from the side as Gustav passed by a group of cadets sitting together. Gustav paused his footsteps up ahead and turned to the side to stare at the person that had just spoken. It was an olive-skinned cadet with red braided hair. Same as you. Oh wait, not the same as you since you seem to be here for the sake of companionship, Gustav responded before turning around to keep walking. Hey, who do you think you're talking to like that? The cadet stood to his feet as he heard that with a displeased expression. Gustav ignored him and kept walking to the front. Hold it, kid. You don't just talk to your seniors that way. He voiced out as he walked forward and stretched out his hand to touch Gustav's shoulder. Gustav turned slightly to the side, dodging the grip. Stupid questions, blunt answers. Gustav voiced out. Chatter. Chatter. Dash, such a cocky first year. Dash, oh yeah, that's Gustav Crimson. He's ranked among the first year's top 3. Dash, no wonder. Doesn't give him the right to be disrespectful though. Dash, from what I heard Freeman is close to being echo-ranked. You little? Do you realize I'm a senior and can punish you for acts of disrespect? Everyone here is a witness, Freeman voiced out. Stop with your pitiful act of validation. I don't have time for this, Gustav said as he continued moving forward. Freeman wasn't expecting this kind of response from a junior cadet. Gustav's unbothered manner of speaking and responses triggered more of his displeasure. He suddenly dashed forward, but then another senior cadet appeared in front of him. What are you doing, Viru? Freeman said with a tone of annoyance. Stop. He's an officer, so he's not restricted entry into this place even though he's a first year, Viru voiced out to everyone's hearing. Those who had no idea about this information had looks of surprise on their faces. Dash, he's what? Dash, don't tell me you didn't notice the star on his left chest area? Stop messing around him. Freeman voiced out with an expression and tone of disbelief as he pointed at Gustav. Did you think about how his pass was not declined at the entrance when he's just a first year? Viru asked. Freeman's mouth opened slightly as he realized this. He looked ahead and noticed that Gustav had already reached the far end of the area. How is that possible? He's just a first year, even though Freeman couldn't believe it. He had no choice but to accept it. In a few minutes, Gustav had finally found the next volume of the Galaxy Peace Treaties he was looking for. It was time for him to digest more information now. In the evening, after the second training session of the day, Gustav found his way to one of the personal training rooms where Vera was already waiting for him. She had an excited expression as she noticed Gustav. Now, have you done what I asked you to? Gustav asked with a contemplative expression. Yes, I managed to put one within Indrik, just as you asked, she responded. Good. How long were you able to maintain touch with him? Gustav asked. Less than 2 seconds. Indrik pushed me away before I was able to complete the empowering process, Vera answered. Which means it will take longer for it to mature? Gustav asked. Yes. 2 to 3 months, she responded. That's not too bad. When it is fully functional, don't let him get taken over instantly. He'll tell you what to do when the time comes, Gustav instructed. Vera nodded in understanding. Now, we just need to focus on the timing of your contact. I will let you use my body to train like before, Gustav said while walking to her front. Vera had an even more excited look on her face as she heard that. Don't go out of control and do something you are not supposed to, Gustav warned. Vera nodded like a little child before proceeding to reach out her hands to touch Gustav. Just like that, another 2 days went by, and it was finally time for the special class cadets to go through bloodline strengthening. The instant they were done with the morning routine, Gustav and the others moved towards the science block. Gustav also wanted to make use of this opportunity to check on Mara. He only saw her once or twice every 2 weeks. She was also quite busy because she was working on a particular project. And Falco were the most excited to see how the process of bloodline strengthening would go. There was a new person in their group as they moved towards the lab. In a few minutes, they arrived there and were asked to wait for their turn like the other special classes. There were about 70 in number in the waiting room. According to the reception desk, only 2 bloodline strengthening machines were available, so they could only go in 2 at a time. They had no choice but to wait for their turn. Chapter 428. Hey Timmy, what exactly does that bloodline of yours do? He asked with a look of curiosity as they sat together. It was quite hard to understand the abilities of Timmy's bloodline, which was one of the reasons any opponent would be caught off guard. How to describe it? It deals with acceleration and deceleration. Timmy responded while raising his left hand. It glowed crimson, and he proceeded to pick a twig from his storage device. The instant he touched the twig with his left hand, it shrunk and turned darker. Did it just age? He asked. Yes. Observe. Timmy responded and touched it again. Fruhai. The twig returned to its initial size and looked even healthier than before. However, that wasn't the end. In a few more moments, it started to grow more branches out of it and eventually grew out a few green leaves. Wow, that's insane, he said with a look of astonishment. Falco and Gustav already knew about this since they knew Timmy earlier than did. Also, he's able to absorb energy from such and store them. Right, Timmy? Falco asked. H&M, however, I can't always do that. A part of the energy gets wasted. It's hard to explain, Timmy said while dropping the twig. His palms went back to normal. Really nice. Now I understand a little, said before turning to the side to stare at Eldris. Eldris, I still don't understand yours. You said colors speak to you and your eyes are always closed, man. He said with a look of curiosity. A wry smile appeared on Eldris' face as he turned to face E. Opening my eyes will affect everyone in the surroundings, so I refrained from doing that, he voiced out. Just a little sneak peek would do. Come on, Falco said while waving his hand in front of Eldris' face. Do you even know what I'm doing right now? Falco said. Eldris caught his hand before responding. Yes, it's quite disturbing, Eldris replied. Falco lowered his hand with a wry smile plastered on his face. I'll open my eyes for a few moments. Brace yourselves for what comes next. Eldris finally decided to compromise. And Falco had excited looks as they heard that. Gustav was also quite curious even though he never voiced it, so he turned to the side also, with Timmy. Eldris' eyelids repeatedly twitched as he slowly separated both eyelashes after so long. Fwywei. As Eldris opened his eyes, the colors in the environment slowly disappeared as everywhere within the vicinity turned white and black. Gustav and the others were extremely surprised as they stared at Eldris' eyes. They had never seen a pair of eyes so beautiful in their lives. Every color could be seen within those eyes, and they were arranged in such a way that even the beauty of the stars up in space would be called trash compared to his beautiful glittering eyes. It was as if every color that existed in the universe was living in that pair of eyes. Everyone felt very uncomfortable being in this environment of black and white. They could feel their bloodlines being affected. Just what in the world? One of the special class cadets in the vicinity voiced out while staring in Eldris' direction. Same as everyone. They already knew that Eldris was the cause of the weird phenomenon after seeing his eyes open. I thought he was blind. Practically, almost everyone here had this thought. Eldris closed his eyes back a few moments later, and color returned back to the environment. Everyone felt the pressure on their bodies, and bloodlines disappeared afterwards. And I thought Gustav was the only charming devil in our midst. He broke the silence. Haha, he is. I'm just plain, Eldris replied with a light chuckle. The cadets who had just witnessed this could not imagine what exactly that power was supposed to do, but they knew that if he ever used it in a battle, whoever the opponent was would be in deep shit. The amount of pressure they felt even though they were also special class cadets was frightening. Now they understood that he wasn't just second place for nothing. Angie and the rest of the girls were seated in the western corner of the waiting room. Angie, have you ever seen Eldris open his eyes? Matilda asked.
No.
Angie responded. Such captivating eyes. I wonder what they do. Matilda said with an expression of curiosity. He has never fought while opening his eyes. I wonder who is stronger between him and Gustav in that state, Glade said with a slightly excited expression. Dude, turn the visibility of the environment upside down? What else does that do? E asked. The opponent will find out when battling me in that state. Anyways, now you guys understand why I don't open my eyes, Eldris said. They had looks of understanding on their faces as they heard that. After all, no one would be able to come near Eldris if being around him meant they would only see things in black and white. This kid is close to achieving cosmic superiority. The system suddenly voiced out in Gustav's head. You can tell? Gustav's eyes slightly widened as he asked. Of course. Turns out he's more favored by the universe than his cousin over there, the system added. Are you saying Elevera won't achieve cosmic superiority? Gustav asked. Are you dumb, or are you dumb? Did you forget when I mentioned how hard and practically impossible it is for beings all across the universe to achieve cosmic superiority? Gustav. I'm not saying she doesn't stand a chance of achieving it, but Eldris has a higher chance while the rest here. I don't see any signs on them, the system explained. Oh, I see. How can you tell, though? Gustav asked with a curious tone internally. Gustav Crimson, Angie Villandrobadia, Gustav and Angie suddenly heard their names being voiced out by the AI installed within the building. Head to the theater for your strengthening operation. Chapter 429. Gustav and Angie suddenly heard their names being voiced out by the AI installed within the building. Head to the theater for your strengthening operation. Angie exclaimed with a surprised expression on her face, but she quickly stood up. Gustav, on the other hand, showed no emotions whatsoever and stood to his feet before walking towards the south side of the waiting room, which was where the doors to the theater room were positioned. He and Angie walked in together and found themselves in a massive laboratory. There were robotic structures moving loads of chemicals around, and some assisting scientists in white outfits with their tasks. There were two exalted massive containments up ahead. They were spherical-shaped and transparent with glowing golden liquid within them. The walls of the lab were laced with reflective silver panels, which not only made the place look exquisite, but also had some functions like preserving and protecting. A massive holographic projection hung up above, and a massive bluish crystal was stationed on the southwest area planted against the wall. Two special class cadets could be seen coming from up ahead. It was obvious that these two had just finished undergoing bloodline strengthening. Gustav wanted to activate God Eyes to observe if anything was different about them compared to before, but he realized he didn't even know the state of their initial internal structure since he hardly paid attention to people. Over here, you two. A middle-aged-looking man with one eye on his face called out to the both of them. He was standing in the midst of a young male and female in laboratory outfits as well. Gustav suspected those two to be senior year cadets who were in the scientific department of the MBO camp. Gustav and Angie passed by the side of the two cadets as they moved forward, who both greeted them. Welcome, Gustav Crimson, Angie Vildrop. How do you pronounce that again? The middle-aged man had a weird look as he tried and failed to pronounce her name. It's Villandrobadia, Angie corrected. Oh, all right. am Dr. Levi. These two are Simeon and Serena. He introduced himself without much further ado and proceeded to say, now I'll need you both to take off your uniforms and underwear before putting these on. Dr. Levi said to them both as Simeon and Serena passed a kind of white cloth to them. Where exactly are we supposed to change? Angie asked after looking around and not seeing anywhere secluded, like a room. You both can go over there. Dr. Levi pointed in the direction of the massive spherical transparent containments. Go change behind the containments. That's enough covering for you both, he added. Angie and Gustav shone confused expressions on their faces as they heard that. The glass-like spherical containment was transparent with light gold liquid within. It's transparent, Gustav reminded. Or maybe it's not. This thought came to his mind as he stared at the expressions of the three wearing laboratory vests. That's the nutritional liquid. The glass containment is transparent, but it's not. You can change right behind it, Simeon, the male scientific cadet, explained. Angie and Gustav now had looks of understanding on their faces. You go first, Gustav said to Angie and decided to wait behind. Angie was also about to say the same words, but her mouth hung open as she saw Gustav's dismissive expression as he balanced himself on one of the tables crossing both legs. Angie turned around and headed towards the far end of the lab. Hey, what are you doing, boy? Don't sit your ass on my chemicals. You'll ruin my experiment. Angie could hear Dr. Levis' loud voice from up ahead as she moved towards the massive containment. She could already imagine how Gustav would respond nonchalantly to that exclamation. A small smile appeared on her face. Few minutes later, Gustav and Angie were standing on a rectangular panel behind the massive spherical containments dressed in whitish skin-tight clothes with a black, circular mask covering their mouth and nose. Are you both ready? Dr. Levi voiced out from up ahead. Both of them answered affirmatively, and their voices were heard across the lab. Begin insertion process, Dr. Levi said to Serena, who nodded and pressed some keys on the holographic computer in front of them. The bluish crystal on the southeast side of the lab brightened up, and some weird tentacle-like extensions shot forward and stuck to their bodies before lifting them up. Gustav noticed that the tentacle-like extensions were lifting them towards the containments. He was moved towards the left and Angie towards the right. Fwabul. Fwabul. They both got immersed in the golden liquid as more and more of these tentacle-like extensions shot out of different parts of the containment and stuck to separate areas of their bodies. Gustav could not see anything within this sea of bright golden liquid. On the outside, it looked transparent, but it actually wasn't. He also felt like his perception was restricted here. Initiating bloodline examination, they could still hear the voice of the AI as their bodies remained in the golden liquid. On the projection up above, two internal body structures were displayed. Obviously, they belonged to Gustav and Angie. They'll have to hide all the other bloodlines in your body right now. This technology can see through, and it's trying to compute information on your bloodline. The system suddenly voiced out in his mind. Oh, all right, go ahead, Gustav responded. On the projection, Angie's bloodline information was already being computed and listed out, but Gustav's was still in the process of initialization. A bloodline with the ability to gather nature's force. She's not just blessed with speed. Dr. Levi nodded as he stated the properties of Angie's bloodlines one after the other. Why is it taking so long for his bloodline information to be revealed? Serena, the senior female cadet, questioned with a look of confusion while tapping on the keyboard of the holographic computer repeatedly. Chapter 430. Even after 2 minutes went by, Gustav's information had not been displayed, and they needed it to properly conduct the operation for bloodline strengthening. Done. The instant the system voiced out in Gustav's head, the information on his original bloodline started being displayed. Genetic transformation? Dr. Levi voiced out with a look of astonishment. The girl is spectacular, but this kid's bloodline is really one of a kind. He added as he checked out the properties. This states that at full potential, he can literally achieve anything. Simeon had widened eyes as he spoke. Both Dr. Levi and Serena also had looks of astonishment. Simeon, Serena, make sure you keep this information a secret. Clear out some of the data on his bloodline before storing on the database. Dr. Levi instructed. Both of them nodded and did as they were told. Don't forget the footage, Dr. Levi added before moving forward. He stared at the massive spherical containment Gustav was currently floating within. This kid, he is the embodiment of what I have been searching for all these years. Dr. Levi's old eyes sparkled with interest as he looked forward. I can't wait to see how he'll turn out years from now. Gustav crimson, he voiced internally before turning around. Begin bloodline strengthening process. He voiced out solemnly. Commencing bloodline strengthening. The voice of AI reverberated across the entire place. Gustav could feel foreign energy start to invade his body at this moment. Although it felt uncomfortable, he didn't sense any danger from it, so he allowed it. Don't worry, I'm with you. The instant I sense any malicious force, it'll block its entrance. The system also reassured him. About 10 minutes later, Gustav and Angie were being brought out of the glass containment. The instant their bodies were dropped, the tentacle-like extensions began to detach from their bodies. Gustav's visibility returned to normal as the golden liquid dripped down his body. Did I just become a Gilbert-ranked mixed blood without any effort? Gustav raised his hand with a look of surprise as he voiced out. He could sense his increase in his strength. Congratulations, you both. Your bloodlines have been strengthened. Gustav, you now have a double B+ grade bloodline, while you, Angie, now have an B grade bloodline, Dr. Levi announced. Gustav could sense Angie's bloodline energy now. Initially, it was hardly there, but now he could sense it properly, which was practically proof of her increase. Angie could also sense the suffocating force Gustav was currently circulating. I'm sure you both must have also experienced an increase in your bloodline rank, Dr. Levi said with a look of satisfaction. Yes, I was initially in the first step of serial rank, but now I'm third step, and I can feel him closing in on the fourth step already, Angie said with an excited look. That's not the only addition. You also experience less restrictions as you increase in strength and reach higher ranks. You'll see the rest of the benefits when you activate your bloodline during battles, Simeon voiced out from behind. What about you, Gustav? Dr. Levi asked. Angie turned to the side as she was also curious about Gustav's improvement. Same, I went up by 2 steps, Gustav responded without hesitation. How long did you last during your accumulation of Serhavo? Dr. Levi asked. About 4 hours, Gustav replied instantly, causing Dr. Levi and the 2 cadets to open their mouths in surprise. What about you, Angie? Dr. Levi proceeded to ask Angie too. 2 hours, Angie said with a wry smile. Dr. Levi turned to look at Gustav with a suspicious expression after hearing that. Are we done here? Gustav asked. Of course, Dr. Levi said as he tapped a button. The announcement was made for the next set of cadets to move in. Gustav and Angie started moving towards the entry point together. Gustav, Dr. Levi suddenly called Gustav back. He turned around and started heading back towards Dr. Levi. Here, take this. Whenever you feel like talking about anything, you can visit me, he said while stretching out a black card to Gustav. Not needed, Gustav said before turning around to leave. Dr. Levi's face squeezed up a bit. This kid? I heard he was hard-headed. Didn't know it was this bad, he mumbled with a sigh while lowering his hand. He's an officer, so he has access to everywhere, this place included. He doesn't need your card, Serena stated from behind. Oh, is that so? Dr. Levi said with a slightly embarrassed expression as he scratched his head and laughed. They'll see you around, kids, Dr. Levi voiced out loudly from behind. Gustav raised his hand in response as he kept moving. He soon reached Angie's position back, and they continued heading towards the door. Dr. Levi, Simeon called out from behind. Gustav. Before he could complete his sentence, Dr. Levi interrupted. I know. The effect of accumulating Serhavo for that long should have tripled the effects of his increase in rank. Turns out he has decided to hide it, Dr. Levi said with a wry smile as he stared at Gustav's back in the distance. We can only leave it at that if he has refused to spill, he added before turning around. As Gustav and Angie arrived at the door area, Angie moved closer to Gustav and quickly put a note in his pocket before moving out. Gustav was taken aback by her action and paused for a few moments as he put his hand in his pocket and looked forward. Angie had already gone past the door. He decided to leave the note in his pocket and not check it out in the meantime. He arrived outside, and the special class cadets waiting for their turns stared at him with looks of astonishment. They felt Angie's presence being more vibrant than before when she walked into the room, but Gustav's presence gave them a certain kind of pressure. This made them more interested in having their turns, as there was no doubt that they both had increased in strength. Chapter 431. Elevra stared at Gustav from her sitting position, sizing him up, such intensifying bloodline energy. Are we now on the same level? She wondered as an expression of excitement was slowly forming on her face. However, when she remembered that it was gonna be her turn soon, she realized that she would also receive an increase in strength. I know he's still hiding a lot of strength within. It would be wrong of me to use void eyes without his permission. She dismissed an idea that came to her head. Gustav bid farewell to the boys, saying he wanted to go check out his improvement. They agreed to meet later in the evening to train together. Gustav started heading for his room afterwards, while Angie still decided to wait for the girls. Did you do it? Glade whispered into Angie's left ear after she sat down. But he didn't bother checking it. What if he never checks it? Angie responded with a frantic expression. Don't worry. He will, Glade assured. From what I know, he still cares about you. So yes, he will check, Matilda also added from the side. I don't know about that, Angie said with a slightly crestfallen expression. Don't worry, you'll beat him up if he doesn't check it, Glade said with a strong tone. No offense, Glade, but it's probably going to be the other way around, Matilda said with a wry smile. Angie laughed lightly after hearing that while Glade pouted. A few minutes later, Gustav arrived back in his room and instantly fell on his sofa. He felt exhausted for some reason. You could have just told them the truth, though. I don't sense any form of malice from them, the system suddenly voiced out in his head. Nah. How do I explain going from third step of serial rank to second step Gilbert in a single go? I can feel that I'm almost at third step, Gustav said while holding up his hand. The accumulation of Serhavo caused the effect to triple, and they already know that, so you have successfully hidden nothing, the system stated. What? Gustav now understood why they asked how long he was able to accumulate Serhavo. That sneaky doc, Gustav muttered. Well, they can only assume. There's no way for them to know the exact state of my improvement. Gustav calmed down as he said this. Gilbert ranked. I never expected to be this fast. It's not even 2 months yet, Gustav said with a look of disbelief. The amount of strength he felt bursting through his body at the moment was so crazy. He could tell that it would take him some time to get used to this amount of strength since he just achieved it in one go. Don't get too excited. According to the stats, after martial rank comes the rank that most mixed bloods are stuck in their entire lives. So expect your growth to slow down after getting to that point, the system reminded him bluntly. Yeah, I know, Gustav replied with an unbothered expression, even though he was kinda bothered. But I still got more than 4 years, Gustav added. He suddenly thought of something and shook his head. The monthly cadet challenge will practically become pointless. Every special class cadet is going to receive this boost, which will make it harder for normal cadets to keep up. Challenging even the weakest special class would still result in loss, he voiced out. It's going to be harder to make Vera win a special class. This was the only downside Gustav saw to this whole improvement. I wonder just how much Elevra would improve since she lasted as long as I did in accumulation, Gustav said with a contemplative expression. She won't improve as much as you did. Did you forget I doubled the Serhavo effect? And also her bloodline rank was higher than yours, which definitely means a lesser increase, the system responded. Gustav suddenly remembered something and reached into his pocket. He brought out a small crumpled piece of paper and opened it up. Meet me by 7 p.m. at the West Cathy Garden area. I need to speak to you about something urgent. These were the words written on the paper Angie passed to him. After reading the letter, Gustav had a look of dissatisfaction on his face. What makes her think he'll agree to meet her? He voiced out. Let's see, for many reasons, like, you're in love and still a retarded virgin, the system responded. What the fuck are you saying? Who's in love? Have you gone crazy? Gustav hardly cussed nowadays, but this time he couldn't stop himself from cursing. Oh, your reaction shows that I'm right. Why is there a tinge of red on your face? The system teased with its babyish and girly voice while laughing. Shut the fuck up, Gustav shouted out. Hee. Tee. So annoying, Gustav grumbled. What are you gonna do now? Isn't that the same time you're supposed to meet up with EE and the others? The system asked with a curious tone. Gustav sat there with a confounded expression while in thought. Thinking about it for so long makes you even more suspicious. Shall I remind you of the old term used on Earth by males? Brothers before hoes, the system voiced out. Shut it. Angie's not a hoe, Gustav said with a tone of annoyance as he sat up. Haha, your reaction was priceless. See how you defended her. You've fallen madly in love whether you chose to admit it or not, the system responded while laughing. Gustav. Today seems like a good day to commit murder, but you live inside me, sigh. Hours went by in a flash, and during this time, Gustav had been busy channeling his bloodlines. He was still in disbelief after the improvement of his bloodline and felt the urge to let off some steam, but he had to wait till 7. At the moment, it was only a few minutes to 7 p.m., so Gustav got up and prepared to go out. He had decided he would meet Angie for a few minutes to hear her out before deciding to head to the training centers. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.